Yeah, might as well.
All right, then I guess we'll share the link. I'm uber professional, people. Okay, let's do this. All right, people, hang in there. Share now. And yeah, that should be enough. Okay, people. I've got a little surprise for you all, including Carol.
Okay.
I am like William Shatner. No, I have an intro for everybody. It's been a while.
Nice.
I know you've missed them very dearly since we started our live shows, which, you know, we haven't had a decent intro. Actually, I don't think we've had a decent intro since episode 8 of Fear the Walking Dead. I don't even think we had one for the season 9 mid-season premiere for Fear the Walking Dead, because that was the first episode that we went live.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the spirit of Christmas, I present you with the intro. And away I go. Welcome back to another episode of Squawking Dead. It's kind of a relief not to have to call Martha the filthy woman or the crazy woman anymore. Awkward name or not, it's clear from the episodes of Fear the Walking Dead that we're covering that she is quite the formidable force. We finally resolved all the questions surrounding her origin and the establishment and destruction of the Society of Benevolent Truckers led by Polar Bear. But in the background, an equally persistent force is gaining rapid momentum. Our gang is growing stronger. Like raw, broken pieces of metal being heated and reforged by hammering them over and over again, our group is finding meaning and purpose in choosing to admit their vulnerabilities and just do better. It's not perfect, but then again, forged metal is not valuable because of its beauty, but for its durability. If we had to choose one point that this season has driven home more than any other, and there are many, it's that the remaining characters have gone way beyond survival or maintaining their own humanity. They've taught themselves, or at least retrained themselves, to engender humanity, often in people that seem impossible. And every time they do, they become stronger, and the impossible doesn't seem as far-fetched as it is on paper. And when I get philosophical like this, I turn to my rock, my swampy island, the woman that'll get me back on the road so we can keep on trucking. Carol.
Well, what an intro.
Did you miss it?
Well, you know, I'm missing. No, I was. It's hard for me to get into it because I have criticisms on Fear.
Yes,
but constructive criticism.
Of course.
I'm not just gonna bash it like an asshole. That kind of stuff. But
a constructive asshole.
Constructive criticism. So yeah, it's winding down. We've got like one episode left, right?
That's right. The season finale is next week, or well, actually in a few days.
Yeah, and then Walking Dead comes back.
Yeah, your pride and joy.
My pride and joy.
The reason to lock yourself in a room for 2 hours. 2 hours on a Sunday.
For Talking Dead too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cue the Lionel Richie music. Hello.
I don't know, but I just
give me your spiel. I know I gave a positive view of this season and like the recent episodes, but I think these two episodes deserve an alternate view. Proceed.
Here's my thing. And I've listened to other podcasts that made this point, not about this, just in general on other shows and whatever. And I agree with them. Villains are very, very tough to write. It's really easy to write for a hero, I think. to write a villain that's compelling, I think you really have to really do some good character development in order to make them a complex character that you are sort of conflicted over. And I think that what makes them more intriguing. I mean, we've seen that with like, and I mean, we've seen this with different shows beyond just like Walking Dead universe. I mean, you could say about Game of Thrones, you could say about like,
The Shield is like
The
a
Shield,
quintessential.
Mad Men, Sopranos. I mean, I mean, you're when you have these situations where your villain is sort of like a character that you almost kind of also want them to succeed. It makes for really good, interesting television. Walking Dead, like Shane was one of those kind of characters where it's like Shane wasn't a villain per se, but that's what I'm saying. It's like there was that complexity, even I would say Negan is another character kind of cut from a similar mold where it's like he's not good, but he's not bad either. And that's what makes it so interesting to watch and just kind of like watch it all unravel. And I think that for me, this Martha character, I think it's just something where I think that they tried to give her a background and I didn't find it, because basically if you were to say like, well, what's her background, it's like, well, her husband was died in an unfortunate car accident, them potentially escaping from the apocalypse, and nobody helped her, so now she hates people and she won't help anybody and she won't be weak. I mean, it's just not compelling to me. It's just sort of like so one-dimensional. And I just, and towards the tail end of the season 2, it almost feels like shoehorned into me. Like we've got one episode left, and it's like, really, we've got one
You mean
episode
season
left?
4? Right.
Yeah, like it's like we've got one episode left. You introduce this character like in the tail end of like the latter half of the season, and and it's sort of, it just doesn't make a whole, to me it's sort of like, okay, I'm going to make you strong, I'm going to make you strong, and like we're going to go and we're going to get him, we're going to make him strong, but why? Like there's no real rationale behind it. It's almost villainy and evil for the sake of being villainy and evil. And that's what makes it like difficult to just sort of watch. Like I'm watching it, but for me there's not really like a compelling story behind it. And that's what I love about show, like like those shows we mentioned, like your Breaking Bad's, your Sopranos, your Walking Dead, your Mad Men. It's like, it's fascinating to watch these characters unravel and do things. Even Rick Grimes, like just, Rick Grimes has done a lot of shady shit that you could, I've said it a million times on this podcast, I'm the biggest Negan supporter because of the fact that Rick went and killed a bunch of his men in their sleep. That's not cool. And
Right.
so, I find that like interesting. So when I'm watching this, it's like, this is not, and again, it's a hard playing field for Fear to compete in, just because of the fact that like we're in a time where there's so much good writing. Personally, I think that there's so much good writing,
You're
you know,
saying like in the
now
world of television.
in the world of television that like, I can't help but look at this storyline and be sort of like, okay, sure. But like, I'm not enthralled, like, oh, what's going to happen next? It's like, well, I mean, bad guy, got to beat the bad, or bad woman, got to beat the bad woman. And to be honest, I'm kind of, if I were to get on my feminist soapbox here,
Oh, wow, there's a feminist
a
soapbox
feminist soapbox
on this
here,
one.
I would be kind of insulted that this is your evil person, because she's not developed. She's one dimensional. She loses her
Oh.
husband and goes crazy. I'm like, really? That's as deep as you're going to get for the chick? I mean, it's like Shane, the governor, Negan. I mean, luckily, thank God we have Alpha coming up on Walking Dead. But
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
that's true.
so we'll have that. But I mean, like this is just sort of like, I mean, come on, it just isn't. You could do better. Like that's just my feeling on it. And I mean, the origin story was just sort of like, I feel like everybody has that story. Everybody's experienced loss in this world. Everybody has. How many of our characters have lost their spouse in horrible ways? Worse ways, arguably, than that, that we've seen. And, for
Hmm.
that to be the reason for her to kind of like fly off the deep end, it's like, okay, yeah, that's believable. You could fly off the deep end, but it's like, does that make it your villain. It's like that's kind of a I don't know. That's just me. Like I think that like I can watch it for entertainment value, but I'm not compelled by the story. That's the thing. Whereas like that we would watch Walking Dead and we're trying to figure out like what does that mean? What does that mean? What is it like? I'm not watching Fear and asking what does anything mean. I'm just watching it and I'm watching it as entertainment. Do you know what I mean?
I do, actually. And as a matter of fact, like, I think a lot of the notes that I took on the last 2 episodes really exemplify the kind of case that I can actually make for not only Martha, but actually the entire season. And I'll start off by saying that I don't blame you, because I think what the showrunners are trying to do is something kind of like they mapped out both halves of the seasons, both halves of the season, as sort of a jigsaw puzzle. On the first half, they kind of gave you the left side and the right side, the before and the after. In this one, it was more of like a concentric circle. And as each episode kind of unravels, it gives you more of the outside, and it slowly swirls. Each piece you get slowly swirls to the middle. Take, for example, the whole trucker arc. It was never entirely clear, like pen to paper, like 100%, how the trucker network came about, who people were talking to. I mean, you could make a really good case, obviously, that Morgan had been talking to Martha in that first scene when he gets into the Mississippi truck stop, right? But at the same time, you're not 100% sure, because she's awful chipper on the other end of the radio. It does kind of sound like her. But then again, it doesn't explain a lot of the holes that we never got filled until like maybe just before we covered these episodes.
Right.
Actually, and actually just on MM54, it kind of finally filled in the last piece of what the extent was of what they were, the trucker network, what ended up happening, and basically what ended up happening is Martha basically takes each one of them out one by one, all the way up until Polar Bear. It's not clear that she ended up getting Polar Bear, but it's very clear that by the end of it, you get the sense that she tried awfully hard, and probably just before she got to Polar Bear is when things start to get heated. Because like in the beginning of basically Mile Marker 54, which is the first episode that we're covering. It goes through the story, and just as she's still trying to figure out who Polar Bear is, where he is, how to get to him, and instead of getting Polar Bear on the radio, she gets Morgan. So she doesn't quite get to him. Now, I guess going back to the point though, it's kind of like what I said in the intro. There are themes that kind of go hand in hand, and I don't blame you for, I'm going to say, tuning out. Because if you pay attention, there's some really interesting, at least to me, interesting pieces that are in play here, that are in motion, that if you start picking them up, and as you keep watching, the holes in the plot, well, not necessarily holes in the plot, but what they're trying to reach for becomes clearer and clearer and clearer as it goes on. Just like when you were watching the first half of the season, what you were watching the plot itself becomes clearer and clearer and clearer as you watch. In this half of the season, it's less about the plot becoming clearer than it is kind of like there is a bit of confusion. It's true about the plot, but more importantly, it's like, what's the point of making all these people suffer? What is the point of making them? And then you start to see in like the last few episodes, particularly these, that they need to be broken down absolutely so that they can be built up again. And part of that involves what people perceive. And you see this in I Lose People, the second episode we're covering, in particular with Jim, because Jim is all of us. Jim's character is us. Like, you think we'd even be a Eugene, but like the more I started watching Jim, the more I started realizing that Jim is just a typical actually, Jim is you and me. He's like the typical smartass, ball busting. If it wasn't for this, we'd be complaining.
Right.
And I start to realize that like we all have things that we could have done and we could have been better. And then just when we were kind of getting to where we wanted to be, somebody pulls the rug out from under us. We've all had those moments. And then you get hung up on it, and it leaves you kind of morose. And for Jim, it's just this constant thing. And as we start to see in the episode, obviously ending from MM54 and then into I Lose People, is that we realize that he gets bit. And that's just the second thing. It's like he never even got a chance to really kind of be a person in the apocalypse. Not really. Mm-hmm. He didn't give himself a chance at first, but he never really even got a chance to get over that and move on to this other thing. This trying to be a functional person in society. Mm-hmm. But the point I'm trying to make is that, Jim is all of us, but also that something that Jim does in the second episode, in episode 15 of season 4, is that he, like, on paper, and it's kind of like what Aaron Stanford was saying, the actor. He said on paper, Jim is 100% correct. 100%. Start to finish. But I think what the second half of the season is trying to tell us is that if you break down your vulnerabilities, if you break yourself down and make yourself whole again, and lean into possibility and trying and doing better in this even worse kind of world, what ends up happening is that almost anything becomes possible. You become something else. And you see each person with their own vulnerabilities and their own strengths and their own talents and their own figure, like action figure accessories and whatever and what have you and characteristics. But you see all of these different people kind of become something better, or like an idealized version of themselves. And I think, and I'll save the last observation really for the end because I think it makes sense. But I think all of this is kind of almost a fake out, in the sense that we think this is a simple story of people getting broken down and becoming better. But I think the becoming better is leading towards a bigger purpose. And that purpose will be revealed in the next episode.
That's a lot for them to get to in one episode.
I'll give you a hint. It's not for them to get to.
See, that's a little too deep.
That's why I'm here.
I know, like, I guess.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't blame you.
With it. Yeah,
I don't blame you. They're reaching for something.
They're reaching, yeah, and I get it, but it's making me. I'm trying to think of the word. Like I don't.
Is it that they don't give you enough to kind of?
I just don't
to care.
I guess the thing is that there's a certain cadence when I'm watching Walking Dead or I'm watching certain shows, and it's like, follow the bouncing ball and let's see where this is going.
Right.
Whereas here it's sort of like, okay. And I think that this is where I'm assuming where a lot of the diehard Fear fans are upset with, because I know that a lot of them have their reservations with this season. And I think where they're coming from, and where maybe I'm sort of understanding a little bit, is that, they started with this show in season 1 with this family. And then which arguably a lot of people panned the first season, from what I heard. Then they moved on to the second season, which got somewhat better. Then we moved on to like the third season, which apparently I heard was much, much better, light years better than the first and second.
Well, I think the quality went up, but I think that what would happen is the season would start off really strong, and the second season would start off even stronger, but the trends throughout the seasons for the first 3 seasons kept getting lower and lower by the mid-season. So it's like this weird thing where the quality goes up and people get more psyched about it, but then it trends harder downward for the first 3 seasons. Season 4 has been the only season that has... it started off even stronger than the last 3, and the overall season 1 through 4 trend, it's finally shown an upward trend. So that's the thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is shown an upward thread, like this season?
This season, 4? Yeah. Slightly upward, yeah. Especially when you take into account AMC on demand, and then also, cable on demand.
Okay.
Yeah, it's moving in that direction, unfortunately.
Got it.
So it gets harder and harder to get the ratings. But like, yeah, if you go by just Nielsen is kind of like a downward trend.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when you take in on-demand, cable on-demand, and especially AMC on-demand, there's actually a ratings uptick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but finish your thought. I'm sorry. I just wanted to correct that part.
No. I was just basically saying that it's, you kind of start on this trajectory and you're following this trajectory, and then season 4 hit, and it was almost like, okay, we hit a reset button and said, okay, we are resetting this altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily, it's one of those things where it's like, a lot of times when I'm watching a season, it's like you're marching towards something, and you can kind of get a sense of like you're going in a certain direction, and you'll culminate at this certain point. I'm not necessarily, in watching the whole season 4, I'm not necessarily sure of what the point is, what direction it is, what is the purpose. I can't say I'm entirely clear. Like I don't know necessarily how you'll end. Is Martha like your new villain for the next couple of seasons or something?
Oh, I don't think she's lasting much longer.
I wouldn't think so, but then why waste your time with this person?
Oh,
that's like just a badly written character.
You know what? I think we'll get there.
I mean?
I think you'll get there as we start covering the show, because especially when we start covering the sneak peek, there's a lot of things that I'm picking up on. As per the trajectory of the show. Now, ultimately, I don't know where this is. I can't make a real solid prediction, but I can tell you the significance at the very least. So it's just one of those things. Like, I don't want to show my cards right from the beginning. I mean, it would help, obviously, to give context to some of my comments, but
no. I'm just basically shooting from the hip and saying, like, I think about like at least like.
See, I'm playing the Fear the Walking Dead game. I'm revealing the pieces as I go.
No, and that's the thing. It's like I'm not, I'm seeing pieces, but I don't know. Is this a puzzle that's supposed to go together? Am I supposed to be stacking these pieces? I don't know what order to put them in or what direction to put them in, because I don't see what the trajectory is. Whereas like when I compare it to Walking Dead, even last season, it's like, okay, the first episode of the season was what, I don't know, mercy, whatever.
Yeah.
And you see this, like, may my mercy prevail over my wrath. And you keep seeing like elements like kind of infused from that initial episode, weaved throughout the entire season. And when you culminate towards your end, you go right back to the beginning again, and it all kind of comes together. And I guess that's what I'm saying. It's like, I watch other seasons and other shows, and you see, this overall theme, and it all kind of weaves together. And with Fear, it's like, I'm not seeing how those pieces weave together. Like I see like, okay, we had this happen, this happened, this happened, this happened. Okay, now we're going to throw in this new character, and this is happening. And, now the season's over. So it's like, I really couldn't tell you where, to me, I can't figure out like what direction it's going to. No idea.
I'll give everybody a spoiler. I mean, I don't know how many people are watching right now. Actually, I do, but the spoiler really here is that I did leave what I think the point of, I'll say the entire season is on AMC Talking Dead's Instagram profile when they ask what questions you want to ask the guests come Sunday. And I kind of wrap it up into a bow, because you think that this whole season is about something, but I think it ends up really becoming about something not something entirely different, but then it's kind of like the show is kind of moving in a general direction. And I think what the last episode's going to do is it's going to take an about face and then look at a particular vantage point. And you start to realize that the season itself is about something completely different. It's about something that you kind of don't expect, and kind of don't expect that everything that's led up to this so far was really about this and not about that. And it's interesting because it's really good. This idea that I have, and I'm pretty convinced that this is going to happen. This idea that I have is good for both people who haven't watched Fear the Walking Dead all the way until now. And it's also good for people who've just started, tuning in. Because the thing is that the overlap here is that everybody that's watched Fear the Walking Dead has watched The Walking Dead. So there's nothing you can really say about people who... I don't think there's anybody who watches Fear the Walking Dead that doesn't watch The Walking Dead. So I think that's part of what we're talking about here. There's a bunch of things that kind of connect to this idea that I'm not revealing and that I'm being really annoying about. But there's also a whole other thing. And then from there, I don't know where it's going to go. But it kind of... We do know that there's a season 5, and whatever it must be that good that they're continuing with the Fear storyline as opposed to overlapping with the Walking Dead storyline. It's kind of like the things that we were saying about the two universes joining up. Not yet. Not just yet.
See, that's
yeah, I think that frustrates me too.
Yeah, I was hoping, I mean, you know how I felt. I was hoping that this would just be like, if it had been a situation where Madison hadn't died at the field and she was actually Alpha, and we see that, like, because it would have tied in perfectly. It would have been a perfect thing, and it would have given a background to like this huge villain and everything, and it just would have been so interesting. And so it's disappointing, and I think, like you said, yeah, they're probably going for a certain direction, but I think that the whole approach this season has been very, very poetic, and that kind of gets lost on me.
Well, I think the major mistake, and I'm sniffing it on you, and I think the major mistake is to really compare. I mean, it's easy to kind of fall into the trap of comparing The Walking Dead with Fear the Walking Dead, and I hate saying that because I know that it's almost like what's the word? Condescending to you, but I'm really not.
No, but I get it. I think the thing is too is that I generally like shows that make me really think. Like, I like shows that make me kind of like, God, what's going to happen? What's this or whatever? And I'm not thinking that when I'm watching Fear. I'm just like, all right, that's cool.
But I really think that I think the Walking Dead does color your perceptions, because it's easy to kind of fall into the trap, because a lot of the elements in Fear the Walking Dead, at least in this season, with Morgan in particular, and then the crossover, you have some of the characters in the first episode. So it's easy to start to think that these are the same shows, therefore the pacing and the way that they're going to start to reveal things is the same as well. And the interesting thing is that the Fear formula is more or less the same this season as it was in all the other seasons, practically. Even though you have two different showrunners, I think they kind of pay homage to the types of people they run across. I mean, they're not grandstanding, larger-than-life villains. They never were. They have personality quirks. They're kind of normal. I did mention this in the beginning of the season. It's like the thing I like, and I like this about Fear. I like that the villains are kind of more or less you and me. They kind of gain their status because of people, not necessarily because of their grandiosity.
No, and that's fine, because like Shane, like I said, like in the beginning, Shane was not some sort of like, oh, I'm this evil villain or whatever, but he was probably one of the most complex characters, that there was, because he wasn't evil, but he had not great tendencies, but it came from a well-intentioned place. I mean, it's
but you could easily say that the problem with comparing, let's say Martha, because we're just to kind of sort of thread it to what we're talking about recently, is that Martha's probably the first time that we're getting closer to somebody that we can actually call evil. Now, that's the thing about Shane, is that the difference is that, like, you start to see these things in Shane in the beginning, but then also you have to kind of get over an evil hump to start to see the other side of it. I mean, a lot of like seeing the anti-hero parts of our villains in The Walking Dead is in the rear view. Kind of. Like, let's say the episode has passed and then you start to think, 2 episodes pass, and then you start to think about, well, what motivated that decision? What is that all about? Why did he give us this look here? And then they start to reveal certain things that make them kind of like not an anti-hero. Because I know that we've had this conversation about Negan throughout last year. Mm-hmm. But it's not necessarily the anti-hero. I feel like it's the anti-hero version, or the anti-villain, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Can we call it that? The anti-villain, where it's kind of like they're kind of heroes, but they're really villains. And Shane is as much as we kind of understand him. So, and I wouldn't necessarily call, I mean, I'd call Rick an anti-hero in a way.
Sure.
Because he's still like the protagonist, you know. It's clear that these two people, Shane, let's say Shane and Rick, yeah, it's you know, villain and then hero. You know, it's really clear. It's like there is a Venn diagram where they cross over, but it's clear that one side occupies one and one occupies the other.
Mm-hmm.
What Fear seems to do, and to bring it back to that, what Fear seems to do is the Venn diagram overlaps really a lot, to the point where some of the protagonists in Fear even occupy a lot of the parts of the what would be in the villain class, like especially Strand, especially Daniel, even Mercedes Mason, Ophelia. You know, her character goes way the other way. Kalitaka Walker, God, he's like, you couldn't tell if he was a villain or a good guy. You know, like you'd see like things that really, and that's the thing, he was really polarizing. People really liked him, or kind of like, oh, I don't know if I like him. You know, that's the kind of, that's what I liked about Fear. It's like you really didn't know where you stood. And then also our characters were kind of like, imagine kind of normal. And this is the thing about the first 3 seasons of Fear compared to the fourth. I had always regarded the family as sort of kind of like the compass point of humanity, where like they were kind of the most normal of people walking through each of these seasons, like normal people making desperate decisions. Season 4 is when things get really dark and dire, and you see them doing things. Well, it's kind of like, you know, the evolution of Rick. There's, you know, you see him try to be this kind of good guy, trying to do as much as he can, but then you get to like, I don't know, season 4 or 5, and you get this breaking, like, it never was more of a breaking point than when he bit off the claimer's ear, the head guy.
Yeah.
And that was like, things changed forever after that.
Mm-hmm.
That was the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then and so I think season 4 was kind of their ripping off the ear with their mouth, you know, biting off the ear moment while bound.
Mm-hmm.
They've finally broken into this kind of larger than life kind of status. They're more than just what they were from the beginning. And so we're kind of in new territory all around. You know, you got and that's the thing, you know, it's because of this carryover, and then all these other people who didn't watch before that tried to start watching. And I think your point of view is emblematic of the ambition of the new showrunners, what they were trying to do, because they're trying to really draw in people that weren't watching before. And it's kind of hard. It's really hard, in fact. To kind of get them up to speed.
Yeah.
And you know, you can't really win them. You can't really expect to win them. And I think it's just one of those things, you know, it's just one of those things where it's really difficult. I mean, I could go on and on, and I will, about the, you know, the last 2 episodes, and kind of try to win a case with you to try to win you over just a little bit. I need to win you just enough so you enjoy the season finale.
Listen, I respect everyone's opinion on it. I know what kind of like storylines I enjoy, and I can watch it for entertainment value. I just can't watch it for good storyline.
Right.
I'm just not like, it's yeah, it's a stretch, and I get what they're trying to do and be very deep and poetic about it, but sometimes for me it's trying so hard, and
Oh yeah.
some things just
it has no choice. It's sink or swim, baby. It's
I know, but I feel it. I feel like the trying so hard, and when it's trying so hard, some things are coming across as even a little ham-fisted. I think that some things are implied and sometimes don't have to be said.
right.
Even like the scene when Morgan's on the rooftop in this past Sunday's episode, I lose myself.
I lose people. Yeah.
I lose people. I'm sorry. And he's on the roof, and they all start passing the walkie among each other about why they came back for him. And I'm like, oh, come on. Like, this is a little, it's a little, let me have some of this ham, okay? Like
It's a little over the top.
it's a little bit, because I mean, look, you can understand the camaraderie, and you don't necessarily have to, necessarily have like a round of like, now we're gonna have John Dory talk, and now we're gonna have Strand talk, and now we're gonna have Alicia talk, and now we're gonna have June talk. I was like, oh, I get
Oh,
it.
you're talking about near the end where they kind of go
Yeah,
back for him.
yeah. I was like, I get it, but it's like it's a little ham-fisted, like, and that's what I mean. It's just a lot of, trying to be so poetic and emotional, and it's sort of like, oh, yeah, all right. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, okay.
I see what you're saying, and I definitely see where you're coming from. I think it's kind of a taste of yeah, it's
Ham.
a little corny for
It's
sure.
it's
It's
a little
corn
bit.
pudding.
It's a little bit. It's a little bit. I mean, like,
Well, that's the
you know,
thing. There's a contrast though. I mean, I think
it's a huge contrast. And I mean, I get it. Like, they have to forge their own path as their own show. It's clear that they're trying to forge their own identity, their own path. I totally get it. So it's like, absolutely do it. It's just one of those things that I kind of wish that there was something, you know, I don't know, just sort of like intriguing.
I think it becomes a lot more clear when we start to get to the end of the episode because there as we go through it, you'll definitely be groaning and moaning about a lot of things that we're gonna say.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time the end comes around, hopefully I can get you to see where I'm looking at, because when you look at what I'm looking at, it starts to become a little bit more interesting. It's because you just kind of
Okay.
have to take a lot of things, like suspension of disbelief. You just kind
Uh-huh.
of have to go on it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you need to step away or something?
No.
Oh, okay,
Mm-mm.
okay. Um, so let's just do it. Let's just get into it. Let's just do it. I know we just kind of overarched, like
Yes.
the two episodes kind of gave the general idea, but it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like let's focus on like pieces,
Uh-huh.
like sections. Okay,
Okay.
so it's like, I mean, so we really start off with in mile marker 54. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is the mile marker where obviously the truckers drop off every number 4 on the highways, but also where we find out where that Martha, or the filthy woman, was born. And you get to the point where, obviously she crashes the car, she has to bury her husband, and then you go through a whole bunch of things here.
Mm-hmm.
And this woman, you have to consider the fact that, okay, so part of her origin is that she was an English teacher. And it really got me thinking about teachers in general. How, I mean, my wife is a teacher, and it really is one of the most thankless jobs. I mean, you don't get the salary that you think you would after so much schooling. A lot of it is kind of like a gratitude thing. And then if you really think about the kind of English teacher she must have been, I'm sure she was a good one, but I'm sure she was a really strict one,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's part of her character. I think that's part of why she snaps.
Maybe. It could
If
be.
you think about it, I mean, I guess it's just the way, my point of view, because I do interact with a lot of English teachers, but I also, my wife does social studies.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's probably the most shit on subject I can ever think of. I mean, I can't think of a subject that's more shit on growing up than social studies. Like, what is this for?
Anything in the arts.
You think the arts? Like, I could
Yeah.
see some redeeming value, like this polar
No,
opposite. Like,
no,
some
I
people are into
understand
it and some
redeeming.
people aren't.
No, there's redeeming values in the arts, but I feel like it's the first thing to get nixed in like
Oh,
the
yeah, for
US
sure.
system. Like, it's viewed as like, like that's not important.
Yeah, but that's
Whereas,
nixed by adults,
I know, but like
like
social studies,
administration.
right? Exactly. But like adults take social studies seriously. I mean, kids don't, but what do kids know? So it's like, no, it's true. I mean, like, what the hell did I know?
Exactly.
You know? So at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, maybe I didn't like social study, but there's a lot of things I didn't like that, as now as an adult, I would say, hey, that was pretty damn good,
Yeah, but look at
So
the teacher's point of view. So she doesn't get it at the time. She may get a letter from 1 or 2 kids in like a decade saying, "Oh yeah, thanks for teaching me social studies,"
I know. Who cares
out
about
of like
this thing,
hundreds
I know.
or thousands rather.
Yeah, but how old are your wife's students?
They're freshmen in high school.
Oh God,
It's the
I can
worst.
suffer. Yeah, they're
But that's where she
insufferable.
wants to be, and that's the thing.
But
By
they
the
hate
way,
everybody.
yeah.
At that
Well,
age, they don't like anybody.
they go from like being these malleable, pliable freshmen, like they're just wet behind the ears, to like being really shitty really fast.
I mean, that's the
So
thing.
you
It's
get like these polar opposites.
you've got like your top 20% that's like, yeah, maybe they're like, you can mold them, they're malleable, they have like potential. Then you have like your mass, I don't know, 60% that are somewhere in the middle. They're not the greatest, not the worst. And then you have like the really shitty ones that are like at the bottom of the barrel, 20%, that they're just insufferable, and they're just gonna they're not they hate everything. They hate social studies, they hate chemistry, they hate gym, they hate art. Like, I mean, it's always going to be something,
Yeah, yeah.
So,
The
but,
shit heels of society.
yeah, they're just the worst, 14. Ugh, God.
You're thinking about it now. Oh, I was very awkward at 14.
No, I mean, I was an honor student, so I mean, I'm not going to say anything. Like,
Oh, I was not.
I was in the good 20%, but like,
I see.
Dang.
Very
Sorry.
malleable.
Very malleable.
Well, hold on. Did you like social studies? Fuck no.
No, social studies was fine, but I mean, I wouldn't say it was my favorite topic. And it was mostly because of the fact that I am as we've kind of seen, a very analytical nature. I like breaking things apart and things that make me think. So I always liked math because I liked solving problems.
Right.
I liked being able to break something down and figure out why, and follow a structure as to this is the answer because of this. And the thing with math is that there's no gray area. A 2 is a 2 is a 2. A 4 is a 4 is a 4, no matter how you cut it. There's no other interpretation. Whereas with English, social studies, there's a lot of different interpretations, a lot of different answers that could work. I'm never good with gray area.
Right. And as you get to like the performance arts and like the creative and performance arts, everything starts to become really subjective. Obviously, there's like some principles, but yeah.
Very subjective. I don't do well with subjective. It needs to be black or white. It needs to be black or white.
I think that's why we're so good together, because I always tended towards the...
Yes, exactly.
The subjective.
You are the yin to my yang. Like, you are very, you have the creative mindset to like explore that gray area and the different shades of gray with this. And meanwhile, I'm like, look, I prefer black and this is white. So
yeah, so fuck out of here with this shit.
Right, exactly. I mean, I didn't say that. I'm giving constructive criticism.
Well, I think that's why the English teacher role is so interesting to me, because are we losing the stream? The YouTube stream? Well, it's good on one end. Okay, whatever. I think that's why I like the English teacher role so much, because it kind of really falls right into the middle. It's like right in between technical, obviously like linguistics, grammar, and then it gets into more high-minded things like literary concepts, theses, and essay writing. I mean, essay writing is still mechanical, but then subjects are subjective. You have to get creative sometimes. You have to find out really how to think about your subject matter. And I think that's part, I mean, look, and then just being a teacher in general, right? The English teacher's right in the middle there. And English teacher is kind of obviously, it's appropriate for what she ends up doing, which is writing on all these truckers' faces. And that's the thing. I think that's part of it. I think...
What did she write on their faces?
I can tell you exactly what she wrote on each trucker's face, by the way. Because I check out the Walking Dead stills, I checked out Tanya Pinkin's Instagram, and she had a lot of behind the scenes photos from when she was doing the Fear the Walking Dead Instagram takeover. So you can get a lot of the quotes on their faces, and some of them are actually really funny too. But bottom line though is that I think there's the teacher factor. I think there's the helpless factor when it came to her husband, the fact that nobody would help. And that's the thing. This wasn't the beginning of the apocalypse, by the way. I don't think. I think this was kind of still in the middle of it, because the one way to really tell is that the setting was overly that before scenes from the first half of the season were overly kind of orangey yellow, that sort of thing. And obviously, like, several months pass, and like, the body of the walker she kills, which looked kind of brand new, which is the most interesting contrast, by the way, is that walker was kind of like fresh. You know, he just passed away and turned into a walker. And then by the time the truckers come around, it's still orangey yellow, but, you know, that corpse is like, it's gotten way more rotten in the street. But the interesting thing is that I think she expected a lot more help than what people were giving her. And the thing that kind of really confuses me is that, I mean, I can easily see what you're talking about when it comes to not kind of flowing into her story as well as we could have. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I think at the same time, like, I didn't begrudge her. You know, she was desperate. She was doing the best she could. She couldn't hold on to her husband. And I think that's part of the reason why she kind of turns. I think that's part of the reason why she focuses so much on the help thing, is that she kind of feels like an asshole for wanting help at first. I think that's what really got her, is that instead of ending her husband's pain, instead of having her move on and be something else, she waited too long.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of spending more time with him before he went, she focused too much of her efforts on trying to get help. And I think that's what really, it's a lot of it's regret.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I can buy that.
And so, yeah, because if you notice that, like, when she's trying to comfort him, the only thing she could say is someone will help. Instead of just being there, talking to him, telling him everything, telling her, him telling her what she can do. She spends time just telling him someone will help, goes outside, waits for somebody, doesn't talk to him, even though he's dying. So I think that's a lot of it. I think that's a lot of what's going on.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see it.
So let me see here. I say something about Daryl here, just like Daryl's. Oh yeah, so that's it. So one of the concepts that I thought of was that Martha and Daryl are a lot alike though too, because as we're starting to see with Daryl in this new season, is that he brings up the question of are people stronger together, or at least stronger together in bigger, larger communities, or are they better surviving out on their own, moving around in just like small groups?
Yeah, but this woman just wants to basically like be a sociopath and like be nutty for no reason. Like Daryl, we've seen the
she's the extreme, right? Of course.
Right. Like it's Daryl is a character that we've seen, which by the way, I did appreciate them being on that rooftop, because it made me think of the scene in the
season 1, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, totally, for sure.
With Daryl, I get it. It's like, you had your core group and, you looked after each other, you're a family, you basically are. They, the whole Rick and Daryl, like, you're my brother. It's like they have this camaraderie, and the same thing with Carol and Daryl, and, even like other people as part of their group, there is that alliance there. So to open it up to this bigger world, it's like, and we're all going to live together happily ever after, that's difficult, especially if you just finish, a war with these people, that's a tall order. It's difficult.
Right.
Martha's just killing people for the sake of killing people because like nobody helped me.
Yeah, exactly. Which kind of begs the question what her end game is.
None.
Really.
There's none.
Is she just really helping people to be quote unquote strong?
No, she's just she's evil for the sake of being evil. That's what I'm saying. I'm just like, what is the end game here?
Well, I do wonder because she does want Morgan. She does want to.
Yeah.
Well, no. It's not that simple.
Yeah, she says, I want to make him stronger. We're going to go.
Well, by the end of it, yeah.
But like she's been saying that from the moment like they've been interacting on that talkie. Like anybody that she comes across, I'm going to make you stronger. When she was in the tank and like driving past them, it's like, I told you, I'm going to make you guys stronger. It's like, that's all she fucking says.
Yeah, but here's the difference though, is that it's something you might have missed, is that in the beginning she really tries to get him to just stop, and she does see something in him, and he sees something in her immediately. And then you start to see that there's something about what she wants out of Morgan. I think she really just wants to get him to stop helping, because I think she recognizes that in Morgan, after watching the tapes and seeing his behavior and talking with him on the walkie, is that he's starting to see that he is strong. He is somebody that doesn't need help. He does want to be on his own. So she kind of looks up to him in this weird way, but she's disappointed in him, like a teacher, disappointed in every kid. I got a lot of issues to work out, but the whole point being is that she kind of like
it's a reach.
Well, no, this is factual. Like she does say this. She does give him a chance to stop, and he's treating him a lot like one would treat a student, though. You would discipline them, and the lesson is not really for everybody else. She couldn't care less about everybody else. She realizes how broken they are. She's seen the other tapes, maybe, obviously, right? So when she sees Morgan, she's like, I'm gonna work on him. He's my project. He's my student. I'm gonna get him to my side, the other side of where I am now, that sort of thing.
Except that she wants to be left alone.
I don't know if she wants to be left alone with Morgan, and I don't think she wants him for help either.
No, she doesn't want him for help. She doesn't want his camaraderie. She doesn't want his assistance. She just basically wants to,
she wants another agent of chaos, I think is what it is. That's my guess. But
why? Just for shits and giggles?
Oh, no, because I think she just wants to spread this gospel. Like, she just wants to clear the world. She wants to clear. Bottom line.
And the gospel is...
I'm going to make you strong.
Because your husband died and now you lost your mind.
Well, I think that's a lot. Look at Morgan. It's kind of like, that's the thing about this relationship, is that there's tremendous echoes of what it must have like for Morgan, because we never saw Morgan go down this path. We just saw it suddenly, and we kind of assumed it based on facts. And it's kind of like a smart move, by the way.
But here's the difference, though. Like Morgan, even in his craziest points, he basically, you attack Morgan, Morgan's going to kill you. Like, you come for Morgan, Morgan's going to kill you. You come across Morgan and you're a threat, he's going to kill you. In like the worst of it, in the thick of it, his Eastman, here is not here, clear sort of days or whatever. However.
Oh, pre and post, yeah.
Right. However, this woman's like, I'm going to sabotage these boxes and I'm going to sabotage these drinking water. Like, you're not even coming across people. You're basically trying to hurt people that maybe could be, possibly you come across, maybe never. But you're like, in case somebody comes across here, I'm going to make sure to do them harm. For what?
Yeah, she hates her thing is that she hates the living. Morgan was more obsessed with the dead.
Right. Which makes sense in the post-apocalyptic world. I get it. That makes sense. I'm like, you are bitter because your husband died. Boo-hoo. Fucking Carol lost her husband and her daughter and is still moving on. And meanwhile, like, this one is, I just have so many problems with this damn woman. Like, her face annoys, everything about her just annoys the hell out of me. And every time I hear the word weak or strong, I'm like, we need to get a dictionary out, or we need to get some other words going here, because like, we can't, this...
Well, I think that's the whole point, is that it forces you to kind of look into why she's doing what she's doing. And
we have one episode left to explain why.
Well, I think it's kind of clear why, though. And I look... But
that's a very poor reason. If the reason why is because your husband died, that's...
No, it's not because... No. I tried to kind of bring it back, or kind of dial it back. It's less about her husband dying and more about how she was when he was dying. Helpless, but also the fact that she... not only the fact that she couldn't do anything about it, but because she kept relying on the kindness of strangers. She kept leaning on the idea of... somebody will come, somebody will help, and then realizing that she kind of just at the end of the day, even though it's not said, she's blaming herself for the entire ordeal, like blaming herself.
And I would have understand if you become like a loner and you say, you know what, I don't need anybody. I'm resilient. I'm not going to be weak ever again. I'm going to learn how to survive and I'm going to be able to live. But what the hell does that have to do with sabotaging random people? You know what I mean? It's just sort of like, that's where I have a hard time just sort of like dealing with it. Like if you are a hardened person and you're like, I don't want to be around societies, I don't want to be around people, I don't believe in this whole thing. When we've seen, other characters go through this trope where they're like, I'm going to isolate myself, I'm not going to deal with societies and people and helping each other and all that stuff. I'm going to live on my own because I don't need anybody.
Oh, that's a
Okay.
huge difference between a depressive and neurotic. I mean, there's degrees of neuroses, but like,
Right. And so she's just basically a sociopath. But that doesn't make
oh
a
yeah,
compelling villain.
what was
It's
that?
not, but that doesn't make a compelling villain. To just throw somebody in because they're just psycho. It's like, okay, that's where I have a problem with it. I'm just like, I get it. Like she's psycho, but that's not enough to be interesting. Like psycho is psycho.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, I get it. It is kind of a reach when you think about it, but
it's,
I do kind of get it though. I
I'm
can't tell
watching
you
it
why
for
I do.
entertainment. Like I'm watching it for entertainment, but I'm just sort of like, you know, it's a shame. It's a shame because it's, maybe it could have been something that could have been taken someplace more interesting. Maybe she could have been like this sort of like tough and resilient, like warrior fighter sort of thing that would have been kind of interesting instead of just like Looney Tunes, you know?
Well, I mean, she finds a purpose, but that purpose happens to be to take down this benevolent network. I think
Or
it's
anybody really.
I think it's the fact that she learns the wrong lesson, or not. You know what? I guess
There's
what is
none.
the wrong lesson though?
There is none. That's what I'm
But
saying.
that's kind of my point. In this kind of world, the all the stops on the railroad track kind of just lift, and your runaway train can just go anywhere. And that's kind of the thing. In a normal world, what you're saying makes complete and perfect sense. But in this kind of world where there's nothing to stop you if you want to go certain places in your mind. And so that's the thing about what she does that is kind of, I'm not saying it's understandable, but I'm saying I can see the mind going to these places where, you're not, you were of a certain mind about people beforehand. And then because of this horrible tragedy and because you acted a certain way, you operated in the world a certain way that wasn't compatible with the world today. And I think that forms a lot of what she thinks and how she moves about her day to day. And I think that's the why she kind of suddenly flips. She suddenly goes crazy because she realizes maybe in that maddening instant is that, oh, I need to be this way and everybody else, because everybody else is kind of this way, but I'm going to be stronger than even them. I'm going to be the one that comes out on top because I don't need anybody. And, anybody that, and I'm going to hurt people who try to help other people because that's not the way you're supposed to be. That sort
Mhm.
of thing, and that, I think that's where she kind of goes. I think she almost, to the point where she hates people that tries to help. Like, you didn't learn the lesson. You weren't taught right. I'm going to teach you how to work in this world, whether you like it or not. And I think there's also like an inherent challenge too, by the way. If you think about it, it's kind of like, I want you to best me. That's what you're supposed to do in this world. I want you to beat me. I want you to be strong. And if it takes me sacrificing myself to do it, and I think by the end of it, you're starting to see that she's willing to go to the mat to get Morgan to either convert or to make him into a walker. Bottom line is like she's in it. She has nothing left to live for. So she's spending all of her energy, she's spinning all of her wheels on this one purpose. And she's found it. It's Morgan. That's the thing. Like in all of her quests, she thought the biggest benevolent force was this trucker society, but it took her not that much time, a couple months max. Like from the time it took to be orange yellow in the background, the cinematography, all the way to the blue present scenes. You know what I mean? And then she found this guy who was kind of like her, but now is helping people, and she's like fascinated by him. And it's kind of like, wait, this project is way more interesting. She like totally dropped the ball on Polar Bear, and it was like, who's this Morgan guy? Or like she doesn't know his name at first, but she does know his voice. And then she's listening on the walkie, she gets the MRAP, she gets the videos, and then she starts to see, this guy is something else. This guy is like me, or was like me, but I'm gonna show him. I can put him back on the right path. Is what I'm saying. And so I think that's kind of, to me, that's kind of, I mean, that's effing crazy, because first of all, there's like these two planes that are operating at the same time. There's this idea that she wants Morgan to stop and she's willing to do anything to stop him. And then the second plane is what happens, what's the effect to everybody else on the show as a result of her trying to just get at Morgan, because that's her goal. Her goal isn't to fuck everybody's shit up. That's not her goal. Her goal has been Morgan from, well, not the beginning, but her goal has, well, actually, let me see. We start off in episode 9 is the hurricane, right? Yeah, I mean, as soon as, episode 10, episode 11 is when we see her at first in the bluebells, or bluebonnets, poisoning the water, right? So.
Just because.
Yeah, but then you start to figure out why she does it and blah, 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 that whole thing. But that's the thing. So it's kind of like, oh, I'm trying to get at you, Morgan. I don't care about these people, but I'll kill them if it means I bring you one step closer to where you were before, because you were on the right path before. So that's kind of where it's at. That's right. What I think.
I hear you.
Yeah, I get it. I know what you're saying. It is a leap. It is ambitious. And it kind of goes back to the original point. But I kind of want to take a moment to kind of say what's on their faces, because on the truckers' faces. So as she's going on this killing spree with the truckers, there's the song that plays is "Keep on Truckin'" by Eddie Kendricks. It's like a Motown song. And so the first walker has "You Don't Help," which was, what was her name? Stevie, right? The bearded trucker you see, like eating that taffy, and him getting from behind with Stevie Walker. What's written on his face afterwards, "Want some taffy." The middle-aged, so she has like humor, she's fucking crazy, but whatever. So the bearded trucker hits the middle-aged walker. Sorry, hold on. Let me say that again. So the "Want some taffy" guy kills the middle-aged younger trucker. The middle-aged younger trucker has "This Is What We Do" on her face. And the last one is the guy that kind of looks like Mario Cantone. I like to reference him as then it got me thinking, like, what would Mario Cantone, how would he fare in the apocalypse? Not well. But that's the guy that's Purvis, by the way. So, Italian looking guy, his name is Purvis. I don't get it, but whatever. So he's the one that asks about Polar Bear, and obviously he ends, and that's the guy that has "Take what you need, leave what you don't" on his face. And he's the guy that sticks around until she gets Quinn. Right. So all the way from that point, Morgan radioing in, et cetera, et cetera. So in this killing spree, you kind of get the completed circle about all these questions you had about, is that it for them? How many people are there? What were they all made up of? And you realize, I mean, for one lady, she's kind of a force to be reckoned with. Like, she seems to be able to take everybody down. So she kind of lives the way she practices what she preaches. She does not need anybody. I don't know. So she makes it very clear that she is that force. She's kind of like a hurricane. I mean, really, a death hurricane. So
I hear you.
It gives her some credibility in terms of what she's capable of. She kind of has like that. I think also the filthiness, by the way, is kind of a little bit of a smokescreen too. If you think about it, like think about the kind of person, like, I mean, look at Negan, looks showered, clean,
always
attractive, leather jacket.
And whenever there is a demonstration to be made, he has the red scarf.
Exactly. The filthy woman, what is, I mean, and then you can look at all the other villains kind of like in this universe, and it's like they're kind of similar in a way. They're
very distinctive.
They're distinctive, they're clean cut, I mean, at least on the TV show. And they're polished, they're good looking, really, kind of. But the filthy woman is honest, like, her filthiness is kind of like biblical in a way. It's kind of like you don't really assume much of her if you don't really think about it. You know, and that's kind of what Morgan does too. Like when he first meets her in that, you know, taking the box and saying, "Oh, that box can help you," and et cetera, et cetera. And he's kind of just conversing with her. He doesn't really think much of her. He doesn't really think that there's anything going on there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, had she have been like somebody that stood out and maybe set off any alarm, like having villain alarm bells, like having really like grotesque weapons or something like that, like yeah, this can really help you. Okay, I'm gonna put my weapon up now and point it at your head. So, you know, you don't really think twice. So it's just kind of interesting to kind of contrast that.
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
So let's see here. Oh yeah. So one of the things that I did want to bring up, because I know that we have a lot to go, but a lot of the things that tie together both episodes is being in the right place at the right time, and also one thing kind of leading into another. And I mean, first of all, both Martha and Morgan are in the right place at the right time. Morgan just entered Mississippi truck stop as Martha was trying to radio Polar Bear. Morgan assumes she's one of the truckers. Had Morgan not left Alicia, wound up at the back of Polar Bear's truck that Wendell and Sarah swiped, he wouldn't have been involved in this part of the story. And like the benefits of Morgan separating from Alicia and winding up on the radio with Martha is that like Luciana wouldn't have, she would have had a harder time finding the gang without the boxes. Left behind with the radio instructions and the beer for Polar Bear and the, you know, because she gave him the beer, she got the notebooks, and we got more of the story, which kind of completes the story. And the idea of Martha is like, you know, this is what we're dealing with. This woman really ended him. Also, Alicia and Charlie wouldn't have been able to radio Morgan either, because had he not left the instructions on the newer boxes, they wouldn't have been able to really get back together. Let's see. Oh, and even though Althea got sick from one of Purvis's boxes that Martha probably poisoned, by the way, they wouldn't have had nearly as much water or food to try to survive and find everybody too. So it's like one thing leads to another. Because Morgan leaves the boxes and then also leaves the new instructions, everybody seems to be able to get together because he tries. Like this odd thing of him trying to leave the boxes and trying to help people too. He's trying to engender this idea that like, okay, these things can help, and if they can help me, imagine what it can do. And then it kind of tells you what it can do. It can really bring the whole gang back together. And that's kind of rare. I mean, it gets so rare that when you get to the next episode, I lose people. I mean, Alicia somehow manages to find Strand, and that's mostly on a lark, but you know, everything kind of leads into the other. Like, okay, had Martha not gunned down the truck and they would have been there, they would not have found Strand and Dory. Think about that for a minute. It's kind of like these things had to have happened for this outcome to occur. As corny as it is, like it just fits. Everything just fits. And if one thing was removed, they wouldn't have found each other.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It's kind of like the anything is possible kind of thing. You really kind of have to think about it. Like instead of taking it for granted and suspending disbelief, no, don't suspend disbelief. Go down the rabbit hole. Like think about it. And, I mean, it really kind of it also starts with Charlie and Alicia too. Like had Charlie not found Alicia, had they not found each other and worked out their stuff, she wouldn't have had the idea for the beach. And the idea for the beach is what prompts her to go searching for it. And then they end up finding Strand and Dory. So all of these things kind of get together. And it's just the randomest thing. You're like, Alicia, what the fuck are you talking about? Take her to the beach. Help your friends out. And even Charlie says that, like, find your fucking friends. But because Charlie gave Alicia a little bit of rope, just enough too, because Charlie's like, oh, here's water. It's a beach, right? So it's like, shut the fuck up. Here's a beach. She's able to actually do more. you know, she's able to actually find Strand and Dory.
Mm-hmm,
So it's just all of these things together. Let me see here. I mean, do you have any points to talk about? Or?
Not off the top of my head on those, but you know, I'm not as so black and white. So
detail oriented.
No. I mean, it's great. It's just I have my points as we get through.
Okay, that's cool. Okay. Oh yeah, and then what you brought up before is that it seems like a lot of things are deliberately bringing up season 1 of The Walking Dead.
Yeah, which I appreciated. I appreciated that. I appreciated the rooftop. I appreciated the hospital. I appreciated those kind of callbacks, which is tough, you know, because again, it's like, you know, you're not supposed to compare to it, but then you have these like little kind of nods that make you think about it. But then you don't want to think about Walking Dead because then you will inevitably compare, and you're like, oh, you know. So
that's interesting. It's kind of like an unintended consequence of kind of giving you that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like to the point, by the way, do you remember the walker that ends up biting Jim? I was thinking to myself, what? Because he had the head wrap, and I think, yeah, Rick did have a bandage around his head, right? I think so.
Yeah.
I want to say yes. I mean, I know he took it off, but I was thinking
I just thought it was kind of funny, like in terms of like the whole curl thing. It's like a bite mark on the abdomen that you don't realize until after.
Yeah, in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't think of that at all, by the way. But I was thinking more along the lines of the actual walker. I was like thinking to myself, if Rick had actually turned, like that would have been him. Flappy scalp.
No, there you go.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of things that like, I think that's probably definitely what they were trying to go for, by the way. For sure. Like callbacks to the point of, and by the way, it was deliberate. The scenes were intentionally shot the way they were shot, the lighting, everything, to resemble that first episode. The first episode, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so I appreciated those callbacks, but at the same time, it's, you know, the consequence of that too is that you automatically think to it, and then you're like, okay, well, I don't want to compare it either, you know, because it's not fair. Like it's like you said, it's not fair to compare.
It's not fair. If you're gonna be fair, don't compare.
Exactly.
You must have quit.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's some things that are interesting because you're trying to figure out Sarah and Wendell, and like, you know, first of all, where they stand in the group, and it's kind of like, I think the one thing that you do kind of get is that they were kind of aimless. They were kind of trying to get by on their own as quote unquote twins. But I think the idea of Alexandria, the more they're kind of hanging around Morgan or Momo and the rest of them, I think they're really starting to feel like, you know, inherently, first of all, as you find out more about Sarah, like she's a Marine, and Wendell wanted to be in the Marines, and you find out more of his, like he does have a little bit of like that monkey on his back, which is kind of like, you know, this handicap, or sorry, no, disability. I was taught to not use that word anymore because it's not good. But this disability is kind of hampered his ability to want to do more, which is essentially his thing. And that's the reason why he has the monkey on his back. Because you're kind of confused about him at first. He is kind of blasé about a lot of things, you know, like we could just leave him here, or, you know, oh, bye Morgan, you can fend off on your own. Right. And you're just kind of like, these guys suck. But you start to realize that, you know, I think they just needed to be with the right people to kind of bring that part of them out, because you do see like a sense of compassion in Wendell when it comes to having shot Martha. It's like, as much as of a I guess evil person that she is, it's kind of like, well, you know what, she's still a person, and, you know, I'm not gonna light her up, you know, when she's down, that sort of thing. So I think we're still trying to kind of figure him out too, you know, as we go on, but we are getting a clearer picture of the kind of person that he is too. And so that was interesting, because you kind of expected him to respond to Althea and saying, yeah, I mean, I would have lit her up. You know, it's not a thing. You know, but like there is a little bit of that in him. Yeah, let me see here. So I think, like, I kind of want to get to Althea actually, because she kind of steps up in this episode. What's your so? Given your criticisms, I kind of want to get your gauge on Althea at this point, like beginning to end.
I appreciate Althea. Like Althea is one of the few characters in the show that I am interested in, and ironically, we don't get as much of, which is a bummer, because I do like her. I do like her as a character, and I would like to know more about her as a character, more of her backstory, what she's seen, what she's been through, you know, that sort of thing. So for me, you know,
and her role to the story too, right?
Well, I'm not convinced that there is a story yet, but okay. until I see the last episode and see how this all miraculously comes together, then I'll speak to it. But as of right now, like I told you, I have no idea where the hell the story is going. So I don't know where anybody fits into anything. But I like her character, and I'm interested in her character, and I would like to know more about her and her backstory, and, you know, where she came from, what she's been through. I'd love to know about more of, like, you know, the people that she came across in her tapes. I mean, you know how I feel. It's like, especially with Abe and the doctor, it's like, I'd love to see an Althea backstory and see, like, some of the stuff she saw. I'd love to see, like, her come across Abraham and Eugene or whatever. I'd like just, you know, some of that kind of stuff. You know, if you're gonna tease us with Walking Dead stuff, then you know what? Like, let's see it. And they did it on purpose. They owned it and said they did it on purpose. So it's like, if you're gonna do it, let's see Abraham Ford and Dr. Eugene Porter.
Right.
Yes.
But as far as she goes, though,
but I'm interested in her character, and I would like to understand more about her.
Oh yeah, no, without a doubt. Like, see, like, some of those past videos or flashback sequences or whatnot.
Like, we've gotten, like, glimpses of what she's about, but we haven't gotten, like, a real full, like, I mean, not that we gotten a full backstory on everybody, but it's like, we know for June, like, kind of her backstory and the camp that she was in and what happened to her daughter, and, you know, that sort of stuff. And so you kind of have some information on how she was informed and how she behaves and all of that. But we haven't really gotten that with Althea. Not yet.
I think a lot of what they've done this season, by the way, is left mostly unspoken, like retold but unspoken, even to the point of, like, our kind of main protagonists, which, I mean, obviously half of them died. You know, like Madison and Nick, and then you still have Strand and Alicia. Like, a lot of what happened to them in the past year plus has gone kind of mostly unsaid, but you could kind of piece together by inference. I think that was good in a way, because when it comes to all these other characters, you get a sense, but you don't get a very clear flashback of their past. You get it basically from what they've said or from what other people have said about them, you know, at max. So I think it kind of doesn't leave them out, you know, of the equation in terms of what's been going on. So I think you may get something. Well, just to kind of get it over with, is that you do see her in the next episode. So I don't think she's lost. You know, because, I mean, part of you is kind of like, by the end of this episode, and it kind of sucks to see certain sneak peeks, because had they not shown Althea, I think it would have created a little bit more tension and suspension. It's kind of like, wait, well, what happened to her? What happened to her? We didn't see her for the rest. We didn't see her for this entire episode, this I Lose People episode. Yeah. Right? So I think it was a really bad move to show her in the season finale. I think. You see her in 2 spots in the sneak, and at least the teaser for this Sunday. And had they not done that, I think we would. I mean, just like you said, she's like one of the few characters that they've held her back enough to kind of make you want to know more, right? She does things, and she does some interesting things, and there's this air of mystery about her, like, not mystery. Mystery. I don't know if it's the right word. You know, when you hold back just enough. To make you kind of like, I'm digging this, but I want to know more. And so they kind of feed the birds to the audience. They kind of give you a little bit and a little bit. And it's like game theory. It's just enough to keep you liking her, actually. So That's interesting. So it's kind of like, well, I think in respect to to her character now, though, like think about the decisions she makes in mile marker 54, that episode. What do you think of the decisions she's made? Like, I mean, she tells Sarah to go on with Wendell, and she tries to go to the generator on her own. What are you making? Do you sense like maybe a change in Althea? From where we saw her first and where we saw her second?
Maybe.
And now.
Perhaps. Kind of like I get the impression that she feels that she may not make it out of this, whereas before she was pretty resilient, and now she's sort of like kind of feeling like, okay, well, I might have to, sacrifice myself, because I think Althea sees herself as a loner anyway.
Like an outsider, you're saying? Still like.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So like in a sense, like maybe that she's not expendable, but like as much as she kind of is starting to become part of these people, she still feels like an outsider. Yeah. Okay. But I think there's something that like she can't deny anymore, is that she is involved. Also. But do you think that she realizes it?
Maybe subconsciously.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah. She's kind of a badass.
No, she is. I think she is. But I think, this is a dire straight situation.
Yeah. I mean, she's got like that new people syndrome, but I think the only reason why she's got it is because like she does not want to get close to people. She wants to know people's shit, but she doesn't really want to know people. Like she doesn't want to be close to them. I think that's a lot of it too.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's part of it.
Yeah. So, so this whole tension between Jim and Morgan, by the way. What's your take on it? I just want to get some impressions. Because, I
think Jim is just bitter that he's dying, and it's understandable. I mean,
that's interesting.
He's he's been bitten, he's dying, he kind of is just angry at the world in general, probably like Martha. He's just this is not how he foresee it going down, and so he's angry about it. He's not like depressed about it, he's just angry about it.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it's his way of handling his
anger.
I guess his depression is anger.
Right, exactly. That's just how it manifests with him.
With Martha, it's like neurosis. It's like everybody else is the problem, and you have to be a certain way to handle everybody else. Yeah, that's interesting that you draw a parallel between Jim and Martha too, because I kind of saw that and I kind of just let it go, but like you brought it to the forefront, and I think it goes back to what I was saying about Martha though. It's kind of like you have this impression of the way the world works pre-apocalypse, and you try to apply that impression into the apocalypse, and you realize, oh, that's a mistake. So, but then right in between that moment is where it shapes the way you're gonna be. I don't think Jim ever got that chance. Like he's been in captivity, well, like not captivity, but in hiding.
I think that Jim is also like a realistic guy. He's angry, that he's going to die, and he has this death sentence on him. So yeah, he's angry, he's upset, like I think his reaction is fairly normal for, a lot of people who would be in that position, not Martha.
Right. Marsha takes it on, she gets proactive. She gets on the I'm like, no, I'm not gonna let this happen to me again. I'm going ham on this. so that's what I think. But like I think Jim is just constantly playing catch up though, because he's just stuck, man. He's kind of like one part Morgan, one part, I mean, I guess somewhat Marg, not in the way Martha reacts.
He's the everyman.
Yeah,
Jim is the everyman, and that's fine. I appreciate the fact that he is like your insertion in of normal dude who's like surviving post-apocalypse, and he's just bitter that he's reached his end. And it's like, I get that, and I believe it, because that's a normal reaction, and this is a normal guy, so it's, that's, to me, like, that's good writing. I like the character of Jim. It's a shame that, he had to die,
Yeah.
because, like, I think that he, like you said in the beginning, it's like he can very well be any of us, more than somebody like Eugene, because Eugene is such a coward, whereas Jim is kind of like,
And
you
peculiar
know,
too, by the way. Like, it's these two things. Like,
mhm,
Eugene is peculiar, but he's also a coward.
right. Yeah. Eugene has a, yeah, he's a little off. Whereas, like, Jim is, he's just he's like the everyman. He's like an everyday dude. He has his moments of bravery, but he's also scared shitless too. This is not
Yeah.
this is
But he's
top.
also neurotic, by the way. That's the thing. What he and Martha both share is that he's neurotic. He's blaming Morgan for everything that's happened. Meanwhile, it's kind
But
of
I
like,
think that makes sense in his state. Like, I feel like when people are like, when their backs against the wall and they're, I mean, look, I see it in corporate America all the time, just pointing fingers. Something goes wrong. Who can I blame? Who can I blame? People just, it's so easy for people just to blame somebody else for things, rather than, nobody wants to take accountability for anything.
I think you're understanding Martha a lot more right now.
No, but that's just,
It's
no,
just too far. It's like a bridge too
it's too
far.
far. It's a
You
bridge too
can't put
far.
your. I think that's what you're trying to go for. I think
I,
that's what you were trying to go for. It's
if
that you can't
they
see.
No, yeah. If they molded Martha to be a sort of like person like Jim, with just with a slightly uptick on the,
Or like a gradual,
or
if
like
if there's a gradual progression towards
yes, if there
where
was
we found her.
right, a gradual progression, but you can't just sort of like, this happened, you go to sleep, you wake up and you're a sociopath. I mean, like,
Well,
this
that was a span of months though. So I think that's what they're trying to do is like
trying.
there was a long period of time between the time she killed that walker in the street, and
Mm-hmm,
obviously her husband died in
mm-hmm,
like an amount of 2 days, I think. But yeah, by the time we catch up with Trucker Stevie, that walker had been dead a while. So who knows the transition that
mm-hmm.
Martha went through. And I think that's the mistake that they made, I think.
I think I understand what you're saying. Like, if we would have seen the progression and we would have kind of understood, and it was sort of like, even if this character had been hinted at earlier in the season at some point, hinted at or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, then
Maybe.
I
Yeah.
think we would have started kind of like, okay, there's this character, and oh, okay, what's going on? And like, but to kind of spring this character in the later half of the season, it
Oh,
just feels very abrupt.
I just
And
thought of
so
something.
everything feels abrupt.
I just thought of something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so something that I was going to say while you were talking about the disbelief of Martha,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes to what I'm going to reveal in my thoughts about the end with the sneak peeks and how the show is going to turn things around on us. I just thought of something.
Mm.
The origin of the Vultures, or at least Ennis and Mel.
Okay.
What if Martha was the one that set the fire at the farm?
All right.
That is your missing fucking piece.
Nah, I think you're giving them too much credit, and I think you're reaching.
Maybe,
I,
but
it, I just think that they're trying way too hard.
but what would you think? What would you think if she did that? If she was the one that did that? That is a huge piece that links both seasons together,
Both seasons or both
or
parts.
both halves of the season. Yeah, sorry.
And that right there tells you right there my points. It's like, it just is so disconnected.
But what
It's
if that
so
does it? What
disconnected.
if that completes
I
the
don't
circuit?
I don't think that's what it is.
That's kind of
I
like
don't.
three layers of chess right there, though.
Especially because I'm pretty sure that Ennis, was it Ennis or was it Mel? Like, one of them had the conversation and basically kind of owned it, that they started the fire.
Didn't
And
they? Did they though? I don't. I
yeah,
think that's what I
one
thought would happen, but I don't
one
think
of
ended up happening.
one of them said that, and said that, because when they were explaining the story of what happened to the farm, I think it was Mel who was talking to Madison, and basically Madison tried to kind of try to answer, kind of finish his story for him and whatever, and he was sort of like, "Nah, that's not how it happened. This is what happened, and hey, we got to do what we got to do," like, just something along those lines or whatever.
Well,
Because
she told. I think what he said was that he got them to stay instead of going when the
mm,
fire started, and he,
mhm,
which is why she tries to tell Madison, it's not good to stay. This is what I learned from trying to stay and trying to stand our ground. But by the way, it's interesting that you and I had both thought that one of them started the fire, but they never revealed that either of them did that, by the way. But we were left with this, I'm pretty sure that one of them did it. It's got to be, they're that evil. And that's kind of like why we were left with the impression that, like, wait, the Vultures, I guess they weren't that bad in a way.
No,
I mean, by the end of it, with the oily walkers forcing their hand.
They were still, they were actually more interesting. I don't know.
Well, because they weren't all out evil, right?
No, they basically were just scavengers, really.
Right.
And they learned how to weaponize walkers in order to basically, take over what they wanted to take over without really getting their hands dirty.
Like the exact opposite of take what you need, leave what you don't. Right. They took everything, even what they didn't need.
And to be honest,
that's something I wanted to bring up too.
And to be honest, if this woman Martha had started the fire if they all of a sudden said like, oh, and she started the fire at that farm or whatever, it would make no difference in my mind. It would be sort of like, okay, more crazy psycho behavior for no reason.
It's the way, I think it's obviously, look, it's not enough to just say that she did it. I mean, it would link these two halves of the season together, but I think it's the way in which it all unfurls. And I'm not sure, actually, do you know how long the season finale is going to be?
I think it's just an hour.
Oh, no.
Like, that's what I'm saying. I mean, like, really, in 1 hour.
I think we should check.
I think it is. I'm going to check right now on my phone, but I'm pretty sure it is.
I'm going to the website. I can't. Hello, people. Season finale, Sunday, 9/8 Central. Let me see here. I have to scroll all the way to the bottom. Why don't they just have the newer ones on top? Okay, yeah, so the last episode is going to be I Lose Myself. Yeah, but I got to check the listings.
And how long does it say?
I can't see for some reason. Let me just see if I click it. Let's see what happens. It's going to be, it's been 1 week. Look at me. Oh, let me look at the schedule. Yeah, because I really want True Lies. Here we go. Fear the Walking Dead. Comedy, shopping, action. Because we have to know. Everybody needs to know. Holy crap. They're going season 1. Oh, that's right. So just so everybody knows, AMC is airing season 1, episode 1, starting tonight, actually, at 1:35 a.m. And they're going to be going episode by episode until the season finale. Or at least, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Season 1, episode 5, 6. And then Saturday, they're doing episode 15. And then Sunday, they're doing episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're going through all of season 4 in one day on September 30th when the season finale ends. Yep. And episode 16, I Lose Myself, is going to be... Oh, I can't see how long it is. It doesn't tell you the duration.
What time is Talking Dead that day?
That's a good question. Damn you. Fear the Walking Dead. Okay, so the rebroadcast is... Okay, so... the rebroadcast is going to be at 11:18. So something tells me that they are going to be overtime. So it's going to be more than an hour. It may be like an hour and 15, maybe an hour 18. That's kind of what they're accounting for. So they're giving Talking Dead that full hour. So it's going to be over the original time. Okay.
Interesting.
Good to know.
Good to know.
That little bit of extra time to hopefully tell us that Martha started the fire for Ennis and Mel.
And then what would your reaction be?
I would, first of all, I'd be like doing a football dance, being like, "Holy snap! I announced it on the show, yeah."
Would that change your impression of her?
I mean, well, I'm already kind of on board, but that really would be like tremendous because again, uniting both halves of the season, the way that they do it is going to be pretty important. It's got to be in a way, kind of like what you want, that shapes, further defines why she goes down this path.
And she's the new nemesis for here on out.
I mean, it basically means that she's been the nemesis throughout the entire season. In a sense, she started the fire, like Billy Joel, which caused the Vultures to come, which ended Madison. So, by the way, it's not just to define her character. Just the mere idea of her starting the fire at Mel and Ennis's farm, their family farm, means that she's the reason why Madison is gone. By the way, the root cause. And so this will really test everybody's mettle. Do you know what I mean? It really will, it'll test Charlie because, Mel and Ennis end up dying by both Alicia and Nick. The stadium goes down, so Madison's out. Nick eventually is out because Ennis kills him. Everything that happens this season is a direct result. I mean, I want to say, is Dory affected anyway? I mean, Laura is.
But you know how this is all like, I mean, it is. You know what that is, though? It's the equivalent to me being like, well, I'm mad at the MTA for being delayed on their subways. And it's like, well, no, the MTA was delayed on their subways because of this inclement weather. It's like, no, so what I'm really mad at the weather because the weather is the one that caused the MTA to have the problems that caused it. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like...
It's easier to blame the MTA?
Well...
Is that what you're trying to say? You haven't been here in a while. You don't know what it's like.
I'm just saying that it's layers and layers. It's sort of like, okay, I'm mad
but
at
Althea likes has layers. Sorry.
Althea has layers, and I want to get to know those layers. I care nothing about Martha. I want them to kill her off immediately and move on to an interesting storyline that preferably has to do with going to Alexandria and meeting up with some interesting characters. That would be awesome.
I wonder, though. Right?
I hope so, because otherwise I have no idea what the hell was the point of this season.
Me neither. But
no, exactly. No idea.
That doesn't piss me off, though. Like, I mean, I like that they tease Alexandria. I think it's rude if they don't go.
Yeah, but exactly, I think it's because that was like that perked my interest immediately. I was like, oh, are we okay?
Well, using it as a plot device to kind of get all these other people to kind of come along, like Jim, Wendell, Sarah.
Right. Awesome.
As being the vehicle for the last several episodes. That's cool. Mm-hmm. It's a vehicle for us. But tell me, in your heart of hearts, when you heard him say that, yes, your ears perked up, but you knew in your heart of hearts that they would never make it. I think we talked about this a little bit. Like,
I was hoping,
just because of this show, this is what the show does.
But I'm still hoping that, like, maybe not all of them make it, but I'm still hoping again. So because there's that little part of me that
says, but maybe.
That says maybe this is a backstory and this will have to do with the Whispers when this all comes together. I still have that hope because I'm trying to rationalize and kind of see like the purpose, like what is the purpose of this season? And so in my mind, like I told you, the whole weaponizing of the walkers that the Vultures did is exactly what the Whispers do. It is exactly what they do. So to me, it's sort of like not to a T, but I mean, for the most part, very much about utilizing the environment elements of what they are. We're going to live among these things and we're going to use them to our advantage. And man, it's like, so I was really hoping that like, is this, and then with the whole sort of like, okay, we're going to Alexandria. I'm like, are you leading this dangerous group to Alexandria? You know, is this how this group comes across Alexandria eventually? You know, because we don't know, like in the comic, we just know that the Whispers roam. They roam from region to region, and they eventually, like, you know, Rick's group and you know, Alpha's group, they they cross paths or whatever. But it's, this group is basically like a horde, and they just kind of wander. So I was like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if Morgan, in his like benevolent sort of peaceful ways, actually brings this savage group to Alexandria, but basically leads them to their doorstep practically. So it's like I kept kind of hoping that there's, that this is all part of a bigger plan. You know what I mean? It's like I keep hoping that this is all part of a bigger plan. But then the more I watch, I'm like, well, I don't necessarily think that that's the case anymore.
I think so. I just don't think. See, and that's kind of what I was getting to, is that the show does this bit of subversion, on a small scale when it comes to specific things. Like you think where the show is going to go, but then the writers and the showrunners, they take it in a direction that you would have never thought of. Probably would have never thought of. I mean, that Madison died, but you just don't know how. Or take, for instance, this season. They've set us up. They painted us into a corner where you think what's going to happen. But I'm because everything in this season has led us down a garden path of where this is kind of going to go. Like your expectation is that everybody's going to get stronger, everybody's going to be together, and blah blah blah, and all this stuff. But I contend that there is going to be a bit of subversion going on. They're going to take you down this path and then do a little switcheroo on you. It may, and I'm going to go on faith and say that it's going to be a good switcheroo, only because of, first of all, season 5, which leads me to believe that there is some sort of connection. There's got to be some grand arc to all of this, to all the Walking Dead, all of Fear the Walking Dead. The fact that they've got 10 years and possibly a movie for The Walking Dead store, by the way.
But I also don't agree with that either, though. I think that they have to think about this end game, and I think it's dangerous for them to be going down the route that they're going. Not that I want the show to end, obviously, but I do think that their reasoning for going to this is less to do with like, oh my gosh, there's such a compelling story to tell, and season 5 is going to be amazing. I think it's more like, let's keep this cash cow going. Like I think that that's ultimately what it is, because from a criticism perspective, like I don't hear people necessarily calling, from the accolades from the Raptors for Fear, and Walking Dead.
From the rafters, you mean?
Yes, exactly.
Not the dinosaur.
Yes, exactly. From the Raptors. I'm sorry.
No, I get that. Yeah. Already The Walking Dead is on thin ice for many reasons.
Right. For many reasons.
Not just the whole Rick thing, not just the Maggie. That's just like another brick in the shit pie,
Right. Exactly. So to be like, we're going to do movies, we're going to do this. It's like, guys, like,
can you make this good first?
Exactly. It's like you focus on the task at hand, which is the show itself. And also you want to try it, like if you're gonna end the show and you're gonna like do this, because you have to try to like stick the landing. So like you have to kind of like what this overall story is supposed to be. And Kirkman, supposedly, he's always said that he has and Gimple, that they have an end game in mind for what it's, for how it's supposed to end or whatever, which is fine, but like they need to kind of think with that in mind, because at the same time, you don't want to necessarily overstay your welcome. And I'm not saying that like I want the show to end, because I love Walking Dead. It's one of my favorite shows, but I think there's something to be learned from. I'm trying to think of the best example of a show that ended on a high note. It's probably Breaking Bad in AMC. Like
they got close to not, though.
Yeah. I mean, they basically like, ended on a strong note that was very much, critically acclaimed in terms of like, the way they ended it and how they chose to do it. And when they chose to do it, it left people satisfied, but at the same time, man, it was a great show. I wish I could have had more. They did it right.
Which they, by the way, they did kind of like a almost Fear the Walking Dead season 4 kind of season for their last season, because they didn't quite reboot it, but they did employ some of the past present stuff, man. By the way, so think about that for a minute. So there is something to be said about having like a plan that nobody knows about, and I mean, I'm willing to give it a try, because I mean,
I mean,
I think this.
honestly, I watch it because I want to see how this all comes together. I just don't see it yet, and I get frustrated that I don't see, and I've gone through a whole season, and I'm like, no idea,
Well,
no.
also, I mean, I think the big thing with you is that you kind of, and this is just for the audience, is that Carol is taking quite a leap, kind of a chance with Fear the Walking Dead. Not to say that it would be crappy, but that like, obviously having to catch up in a short period of time, using synopses and
Hmm.
backstories and stuff like that, and
Hmm.
saying, I'm not really confident that I can cover this and all that stuff, but I'm gonna give it a try, and I think with anybody, when you want to give something a try and you kind of, in some senses, especially when you're trying to cover a show like this, it's kind of like you want to give it a fair shake, but you would feel, and this is kind of like the argument for Martha again, by the way, you want to kind of give it a fair shake, but when it doesn't pan out, you feel even more angry that you gave it a chance to begin with.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
so like, it's like, oh man, I gave it a chance and it just fucked me in the ass.
Ugh.
It's like, so you feel that much more upset at yourself for
Hmm.
banking on humanity, or or in this
Hmm.
case,
Hmm.
banking on this show because you had such high hopes,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so
I mean, I went into it with trepidation. Like I didn't go into it with like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. I was
oh
sort of
no,
like,
no, I know.
I was like, okay, like let's see, let's see how this goes. And I was definitely intrigued, and there were some good, solid episodes this season. Don't get me wrong.
Well,
That was.
especially with the things that they were trying to do with casting, different
Hmm.
showrunners, et cetera, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera.
but I think that it's certain things are a stretch. This woman, Martha, is a stretch. Like I told you, the beginning theme to me also is a miss. Because again, it's like I know what they're doing in terms of like, okay, every beginning is different and it's representative of like a main theme, and like again, very deep, and it's like
By the way, it's such a
doesn't have to
departure from, and I know I've said this before, but it's like a
be. Mhm.
huge departure from the first three seasons. That
Yeah,
intro scared the fuck
that
out of me.
and that's what I want. It's
You,
fear. It's called fear.
I know it was just noisy.
It was. It
It was
was
just like
very. It
like
was
I'd have to lower the volume. Like
pathetic.
Jesus, my wife is sleeping in the next room.
Yeah, no, it was very like synth, very, harsh. But I
But that
get
was only a few seconds, also. By
it
the
was,
way,
yeah, it was a very few seconds. Yeah.
it's like shorter than this one, by the way.
I mean, it was very short, but it was very like jarring,
Yeah,
and I get what feeling it's supposed to emote,
yeah, of course.
or even like Walking Dead's theme, which like as soon as I hear it, I'm like, oh, The Walking Dead is starting. It's
Yeah,
like
there is something about that build up, right?
what?
Of the theme music. It's kind of like,
For
oh,
yeah,
like
yeah.
you don't skip it either, by the way.
No, I don't skip it. I do not, and it's like, but with fear to basically go this route of like, okay, well, it's going to represent what's happening in the episode, whatever. I'm like, I get it. I understand what you're trying to do, but it's almost like, speaking of being a teacher, it's almost like being a teacher and like somebody like, doing a creative writing course and saying like, well, this represents, or no, you know what? I'll give you a perfect example.
Oh,
I
please,
studied, I studied in my personal life.
even
I
better.
studied, I studied architecture, and like architecture is full of some like fucking whack jobs. So, like, to give you an example, yes, architecture is supposed to be about building and construction, which it is. But most of the time, when you study architecture, especially when you go to like schools that are a little fancy,
Okay,
basically, they are very theoretical based, meaning that I worked on projects sometimes that had no basis in reality whatsoever.
like that would never get built, basically.
It was impossible. Like, for instance,
Structurally possible, but like nobody would want
no,
it.
not even. I'll give you an example.
Oh, okay.
Not even. And I always tell this as an example. There was one time that my project was to read the story of the mythology of, do you know the story of Theseus, the Minotaur, the
Of
Labyrinth?
course.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I'm a
it's like
big mythology guy.
we had to read that, and then we had to build a model that was certain dimensions. There were certain dimensions to this model, and you basically could pull out elements from that model. It was like basically like your model. You had to envision like if you had a thick block of narrow wood, and you had to imagine that you were taking pieces out of there, but you had to still maintain it within the model, but so not completely discard the waste. There's no waste, essentially.
So you had to reutilize everything you took out.
Right.
Okay.
The model has to represent an interaction between two characters from the mythology. And then I had to create 3 charcoal drawings, one showing the point of view of one character within the model, one showing a point of view from the other character within the model, and another charcoal drawing showing a third party point of view of the area where the 2 characters interact within the model. It's supposed to be like a section of the labyrinth representing the relationship between 2 characters.
Made out of 1 block of wood or something,
yeah.
right? Or 1 solid thing.
No basis in reality, obviously. This is not something at all grounded in anything. And it's fine.
And anything usable.
No. No. I mean, like when I went out into the real world, like, I mean, none of that stuff like was applicable whatsoever. I mean, like, but the thing is that, I mean, it was good from a creative standpoint. Like it gets your creative muscles going, and you never get a chance to be creative like that in the real world. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
When you get out in the real world, you're building somebody else's vision. You're not designing really, unless you're, have your own firm or you're what people call a starchitect, like, fancy, those up, like the kind of architects that everybody knows about, and they're, big time. So they can design, but most people are implementing somebody else's vision, or you're just, recreating like a model or whatever. But so no, you definitely don't get a chance to be that creative and stuff. But I would see when I was in college studying architecture, like all these crazy sort of like, and this represents this, and I'm doing this, and it represents this or whatever. And I was the person who would sit there rolling their eyes 180 degrees into their head, like, yeah. it was me and this, I remember distinctly, me and this other classmate, this Italian guy from Philly, who was also in my class. And I think the 2 of us were always like, just not not, and it would drive me crazy, because for me, because I was somebody who's so grounded in reality, if we had to build some sort of concept model or whatever, I would build some sort of model that resembled something that was tangible,
Right.
I literally had classmates that would bring in a plank of wood with a bunch of melted candles on it that they left from the night before, and then like explained about how like this represents this and this represents that and whatever. And I'm sitting there being like, really? and I think
like you don't belong here, basically.
Well,
I can't take you seriously.
Well, it's like it's just not me. Like I'm not gonna say it's like you don't belong here, because listen,
Come on, be real here. Come on, it's
me. There's enough for everyone to go around. So it's like, look, there's a place for everybody.
Okay, that's very diplomatic of you.
Yeah, it's true. Listen, there's a time and place, and for people who want to just kind of do something like that, and that's fine. But like those people aren't working in corporate America.
Right. Right. Exactly. I mean, they don't find the practical jobs. I mean, these are people that like graduate with high-minded degrees, but then can't find work because none of their stuff is practical. It's not grounded.
And that's fine, because they're it is what it is. So it's like, there's a place for everybody. But like when I see the beginning of Fear and I see all this stuff and it's like, well, this represents this, whatever, I get taken back to architecture school. Like, and I'm sitting there sort of like, just give me a theme song that's going to just sort of like make me excited that like the show is starting and here it is, it's back. Okay. Instead of like, okay, well, let me look at the beginning thing. Like, okay, there's a car alarm siren, so I guess that's going to be a prominent theme. And stop. Like,
I guess I stopped looking that far into it. I kind of just like the music on its own, personally. I know you don't like it, but
it's like a Western.
Yeah, I mean, it's
twangy.
There's something about it that's kind of. I've always kind of liked that kind of the idea of the frontier. And what that could represent. I mean, maybe what that could represent for the show, but like I love like visiting like Wyoming, Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, Oklahoma even to a certain extent, but in Nebraska.
Sure.
So like these southern regions, it's kind of like there's just so much space, and the show kind of demonstrates that a little bit too. Like when in the beginning when they're kind of they run into Leland and all that stuff. And it becomes really clear that there's really, and the show kind of brings it up every now and again too, by the way. They actually brought it up again in the last episode. It's kind of like there's nothing out there. You know, whatever was out there already, the hurricane is taken away. There's really nothing out here. You know, there's no real good opportunities to kind of build this up again. You know, land is garbage. Garbage is everywhere. No structures left over. And so they kind of paint it. They paint them, and this is actually interesting because this does kind of bring us back to reasons why they have to go to Alexandria, and that's there's nothing out there. So where are they going to go? I mean, they're not going to go to California. They've been out there. It sucks. Mexico, out. You know, some of these regions in the Southwest, out. North, maybe. I don't know. But it kind of paints them in a corner. And so it really makes you think, if they're not going to Alexandria, what's going to happen to them? Where are they going to go?
Yeah, definitely.
So, but further to the point, it's kind of like the theme song there, it does reflect what is going on in this particular area of the United States. Let's say there's just nothing out there. It's barren. And so that music kind of resembles that kind of barren frontier. You know, yeah. But you know, I mean, you know, different strokes for different folks, right?
That's what I say. Listen, that's exactly what I say. Like, I'm not knocking anybody's, you know, joy.
Yeah. But yeah, I could totally see that though. Morgan, yeah, Jim being the neurotic. I don't know. I just feel I think a lot of the reason why I feel sad for Jim, though, by the way, at the end of the day, is kind of like, it's kind of what he goes through in the apocalypse, pre-apocalypse, is the stuff that we go through now, but it's the stuff that carries over. You know, like, you can't carry that baggage in this new world, like in this broken world, you know, and I wonder, like, it does make me wonder a little bit, like, how we would fare trying to think of a similar situation. Do you know what I mean? Like, if that sort of thing would have happened to us, like, oh, I finally got my big break, or this podcast finally takes off, then the apocalypse happens. First of all, I mean, I know we'd be a little bit more you would definitely be more prepared with your go bag. But,
possibly.
But then I wonder, like, okay, well, the internet's down, so we can't podcast anymore. And I'm just gonna, you know, we almost made it big, that sort of thing, and you know, yeah. So it's just that kind of thing, like, you know, are we prepared? You know, I don't know. I mean, there's little bits of that in our own lives that sometimes we're on the cusp of greatness, but we're just not quite there. And then we feel like we're almost there, and then we almost get it, and then it gets taken away or something like that. It's just something I identify with, and it's kind of like, I mean, as opposed to you, I think I was more annoyed with Jim than anything, because I kind of wanted him to not be that. You know, like, sometimes we watch things because we want to see the hero that we could be, not the shit heel that we are.
Yeah.
So you need to get a good mix of, I mean, obviously, but Jim was just that hit close to home in some ways with what people kind of are now. A little bit neurotic, a little bit of an asshole, or at least what we think they are. So, you know, so it's kind of like, come on, buddy, buck up. And I guess he did good within the last few minutes of his life, but which, I mean, I was glad for at the end of the day.
Right.
You know, and I think a lot of that has to do with that corniness. I mean, that corniness of each and every person finding a way to, you know, having found themselves, get together and then come to realize, oh, none of us would be here without Morgan in a way. You know, Morgan is what got us to stop killing each other. Morgan is the one who got Alicia to come back. He befriended John Dory, got him back on his feet had he not intervened. Saved Alicia out of a pickle, but then it's the idea of him and the idea of Madison, you know, the idea of people just need to be together. Not knowing that he was doing it at the time, like kind of just trying it out and seeing what happens. And then having a fondness for everybody, you know, and you know, I mean, that one episode of him going to everybody saying, hey, I want you to come to Alexandria with me. Hey, I want you to come to Alexandria with me. Him trying to get people to be included in his life. Like his like last attempt to really give this people thing a try. And it's like, oh, I guess I'll be on my own. And Althea's in it really just for the story, not really for him. But then I think there's a little bit of a turnaround, you know? And they all kind of want to, you know, instead of it being kind of like a, you know, as people start to find their, you know, will to live, the reason to move on, their purpose again, they start to realize that, you know, hey, Morgan's going through a tough time. And he was there when we needed him and we didn't want him around. So now we got to kind of show him that we do want him around and we do appreciate him when he's not here.
Right.
So I think that's a little bit of the reason of that corniness. You know, there's that, and, you know, I'll admit one thing. There are some things that they didn't quite do quite well. Like I mentioned my one gripe, I think in the last episode, where we covered the whole episode with the Lagavulin whiskey bottle that Strand was trying to get. I wish that they would have, I mean, it would have only occurred to you if you paid, you know, attention to absolutely everything in the show to realize how significant that bottle was to him. And had even like Coleman Domingo, you know, brought up the significance of that bottle on Talking Dead, it would have made that much more of a difference to kind of make us understand. But that's the thing. He shouldn't have had to do that in order to kind of realize the significance of certain things. So I think that, and the interesting thing is that's the one he directed, I think. If I remember right, I want to say yes. Yeah, I think that's right. So, no, that was, you know, he wasn't in that. No, that wasn't him. He did the one, I think he did the one where it was June and Althea, and then Wendell Morgan and, was it Luciana? No. Wendell Morgan and Sarah. You know, the one that he wasn't in.
Right.
But yeah. I mean, it seems like the last few weren't as carefully crafted as, and make you feel. And I think that's what makes some of those scenes a little bit more, corny, or hammy, or cheesy, or ham, corn, and cheese.
There you go.
My favorite. Yeah, I'm trying to like blaze. I just, you know, I get so detail oriented with these episodes, and I realize, okay, we got to cover this whole thing, these two episodes together, and it's just too much. Yeah, I mean, I even covered ahead of time that on paper Jim is absolutely right, and oh yeah, okay, so to kind of further the whole point about Jim, though, I'm glad I kind of started talking about that, is that, and I kind of mentioned this in the beginning, the whole thing about Jim being right, I mean, on paper, is very important, because if it's the difference between, and we do this a lot now in our lives, I think a lot of people just want to be right about something, or just want to win an ideological argument or something like that, without realizing what the consequences of winning that argument might be. However they decide to try to win it, you know, winning the intellectual argument at all costs, or trying to win, or trying to be right about something. You know, like on paper, you know, if I'm sick and, you know, I take antibiotics, you know, I'll get better, right? But if there aren't any antibiotics, you know, every decision you make at that point could be a bad decision, and then you could blame yourself or that person for directing you to make those decisions, right? And you could be right about those decisions, right? You could say, oh, you should have listened to me here, you should have listened to me there. You know, you were going to die anyway, that sort of thing. You know, you're going to get even more sick, or, you know, get a fever and burn your brain out or something. But I think that, like, on paper, everything more, you know, Jim says about Morgan's decision making is kind of like, well, first of all, you didn't have anything better to say. You know, you didn't have any more better ideas based in reality, in Morgan's better, more informed reality, by the way. You didn't have things to offer in that realm. So you just can't sit there saying that, you know, oh, this guy led you down a garden path and now you're stuck. You know, so yeah, so what if you're right? You know, at the same time, you're not offering anything better. And just because you're right doesn't mean that that makes everything better. You just got to keep trying, doing whatever you can, and not worry about pointing the finger. So it's just this thing of like, it kind of just made me think of like how we do this in life. And sometimes we win an ideological argument based on like hashtag fake news. Like we think we know what the story is, like Jim. But at the end of the day, we're working off information that maybe everybody kind of knows, in a way. But, fine, you won the argument, but you didn't. At the end, if we were to follow you, we definitely wouldn't be alive. That sort of thing. So it's just something that I kind of wrestle with a little bit because, it's, I kind of wanted to analyze why Jim, like in some ways, Jim is right on paper. Like everything he's saying makes sense, but not in this reality. And it's the fact that every other character on this show doesn't follow Jim's on paper logic that leads them to better things. Because they kind of don't succumb or they almost succumb to that kind of logic, that kind of it's like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, that sort of logic. That's what Jim is like, oh, I'm not going to take a shot. It's like where Strand was on the island. It's like, I'm just going to give in. It's not worth it. This makes me right. I'm right to stay here because this is the best for me right now. Trying is what will get me hurt, And by the end of it, Strand gives it a try. And once he sees Alicia and Charlie teaming up, and like, first of all, the fact that they're together to begin with, her of all people, teaming up with Charlie to do something together, to workshop together, that alone is kind of like, well, if these two can patch it up, anything is fucking possible. And that leads to more and more things. Like when Dory's in the pits, that it's Strand's reaffirmation of like, wanting to be better, wanting to have hope again, that brings Dory out of the pits. So it's just all of these things. Everybody trying on something, and then it leads to like, anything's possible. No one's gone till they're gone. What was the third thing? It's like Naomi. It's like June also. Like she's trying things on when she keeps telling Morgan in the affirmative. Like, are you going to find a way down? No, she says, you're going to find a way down. You're going to get us out of this. It's not even a question. It's like, what do we do now? I mean, everybody else is asking that, but June is like, so like, what's the next step? You're going to get us out of this. Yeah, you'll find a way out. You'll give us a suggestion. She's trying the affirmative because to do otherwise is kind of like, for her it's going to be backsliding. Like run away. Every man for himself, like Jim. So I don't know. I kind of ran with that thought because it all kind of ties together though. Everything that these people are doing in the season is reverting to old habits, but then also trying on this thing where they kind of retry or reinvent the way they kind of want to do things the Madison way. Like it's one thing to kind of chase after ghosts and try to live up to their ideals from this kind of like pedestal, but it's another thing to do it your way, to go through your own path, your own kind of struggle, and then come out the other end and figure out, this is the right way, but I kind of had to get to this bad place in order to find it. So, I don't know. It's where deep. We are. It's where you are.
It's deep, man.
Yeah, that's where I live. I live in the deep end, even though I'm really short.
There you go, deep.
Okay, I do have to admit one thing. Sarah gets like the best line in that last episode. If you were paying attention.
Okay.
She tells Jim when she's like really frustrated with him. She's trying to get the recipe for his beer.
Yes.
She's like, "You're a class A asshole, an unpleasant jagoff who fills every room he steps into with a philosophical fart. But your beer, man, it's poetry in a bottle. That's you too, and that can live on."
Yeah, that was a good one.
Philosophical fart. So you're warming up to her.
No, I like her. I just thought the Momo stuff was silly. because I just can't get around. I can't embrace silliness in post-apocalyptic world.
I,
So,
I
you know,
want to be in the room. I wanted to have been in the room with you when you
mm-hmm.
heard the name for Jim's new beer or Jim's reinvented beer label.
No, I was fine with that. I mean,
You
like the
like
thing,
Jimbo's Beer Bows? I could hear you groaning from New York City.
you know what? I don't groan when it comes to this stuff. It's like I just sort of like it has no effect on me, basically. Like I'm just kind of stoic, sort of like watching it. Like there's no emotion.
Even I
Like,
was kind of like, that's so stupid.
yeah, I mean, but the stupidity is on another level with this already. So it's sort of like, okay, more stupidity. All right.
Oh, so it kind of just dragged you to the depths of stupidity.
Yeah,
You're kind of invested.
I'm kind of numb to it.
She's kind of right
Yeah.
though. Like the weird thing is that like as like what the fuck is Jimbo's Beer Bows? I kind of just want like. I mean, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess it kind of fits in.
I was like, you know what? I'll allow it.
It is
Whatever.
growing on me.
I was like, whatever, you know. Like,
Because even that was a bit too much for me.
I was like, we're already in we're
In the
already
zone.
a bit much. Yeah. So it's like, what's another? Just ham it up some more. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're in that spectrum of
Yep.
stupidity, stupid
Mhm.
humor, basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what's another thing gonna do? You know. So it's like, yeah. So it's like, it doesn't really incite any sort of reaction, really. But no, I appreciate her character. There are some interesting characters. It's just, you know, they're kind of it's just above the story, you know. Like I think that there are interesting characters, and I think that they could be utilized in some very interesting ways. It's just a matter of, you know, what is that interesting way going to look like? What's the plan look like? This Martha chick, get rid of her immediately in the next episode. In
Yeah.
fact, kill her off in the first 5 minutes if you have to, and start getting on that road to Alexandria. Like I don't know, you know, just something. If they drag out killing this woman, it's going to be like ridiculous. It's like, please do not have some sort of dialogue between Morgan and her, and existentialism and meaning of life and all that. No. You know what it reminds me of? Like if you've ever seen Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the
Yeah.
guy like does all these fancy things with the sword and he just takes out a gun and shoots him. I'm like, exactly.
Yeah.
Stop with that. Stop. If the when the monologue starts, stop. Take out the gun and shoot her and call it a day. Like it's just.
But you know it's not going to happen.
I know.
You can already see it from the sneaks.
Exactly. I'm already annoyed.
Yeah. The good news is that you kind of don't see her for some of those sneak peeks too, by the way.
That is good. I'm like, I don't want to see.
So it kind of makes you wonder what state he's going to find her in when he does find her eventually. And then there's also the writing on his forehead too.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different font too, by the way, but we know that she confirmed that she wrote it. Even though it's different. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't tell. I can't tell where Morgan's at more than anything else. He seems fine, but I don't know. Maybe it's a smokescreen. I don't know.
I don't know.
And that's the thing. So I'm not really sure.
No, I am not. That's the thing. I am not clear.
I think we have to give these shows a lot more credit, because a lot of the times that they've done this sort of thing, it's not that there's a payoff, but they do it. I want to say that they do it for a reason, even though it sounds really cliched, but it's true. You know, with every unfortunate decision that they make in terms of development, or like where a particular character ends, you know, it in the end, that ending means something, or that plot. The reason why that plot goes in that particular direction is because it leads to something else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think it's really easy to kind of. I mean, look, obviously you taking a chance on the show and then finding out, you know, that would suck. But like, we're not there. We're not at the end of the road yet, and that's. I could see why you're trepidatious, because like, okay, it's kind of like the way we. Okay, do you remember the way you felt when you saw, the season ender for season 8 of The Walking Dead, and how well that all came together?
Yes.
And how like nervous we were. Because we didn't know how that was going to quite pan out. And then all of a sudden, now it wasn't like the best ever, but it definitely did satisfy some of the concerns that we had. We had some major ass concerns leading up to that episode. So many things in the air. Like, I was stressed out, like with my note taking and stuff like that. And they somehow managed to kind of wrap it up in a bow. Like, and they wrote it and narrated and boarded it and filmed it in such a way that, you know, I can dig this. I can munch on this, you know? And so there's no reason for me to think that Fear the Walking Dead can't do the same thing.
Yeah, no, they can.
I kind of like the way Ian Goldberg and Andrew Chambliss kind of... I like the way they've boarded this season. Like, there's more of an effort towards clever kind of... And I know in some ways it's ambitious, but at least for me in the first half, it paid off. And so there's no reason for me to think that they can't pull off the second half. And more so if they do find a way to kind of really unite this season under an umbrella of some kind, like kind of, you know, saying, let's say Martha was responsible for the fire or something like that, or maybe something else. It could be something completely different, because I do think there needs to be something that you know, brings it all home, you know, not just the future, but like ties up everything that's happened, all the misery and all the... I mean, it's one thing for everyone to be better off than the way they were before, but it doesn't mean that everything is perfect too, by the way. It just means that, like, this whole season means something. There's a bigger meaning behind what has happened, you know, between maybe in Martha being responsible for, let's say, everything that's happened. That's just an example. They could tie together something that's completely different. You know, it could be completely something else. But that, I mean, that would be nice. You know, I'm not making big asks like, you know, Fear the Walking Dead characters being involved in the overall The Walking Dead story. I've kind of ruled that out. We've got enough on our plate with The Walking Dead to kind of be like, okay, all right, I would like that, but, you know, I'd rather focus on what we got right now in our hands. So I'm not going there, but I would like a nice send-off. Like, I would like everything to kind of connect. I think they can do it. I really do think they can do it. And to be honest, I can't wait to see what your reaction is next week, because it's kind of like, I'm really curious. I really want them to win you over, you know, more than anything else. I'm already in. I like where the show has gone, even until now. But I do recognize that they can definitely do more, and I think that they can, because it looks like that's the direction that it's going towards, like something big. And you know, we can even, let me see. Let me see here. Yeah, we can go there now. I mean, obviously, you know, they get off the roof. They take the freight elevator. Morgan throws a body on the car. The car alarm goes off. They're able to leave. They leave. They come back. The corny scene happens where they save Morgan with the fire truck, and there's some suspenseful action scenes and stuff like that. And then seeing everybody kind of rallying around Morgan gets Jim to kind of say, hey, you know what? He doesn't really say it, but it's kind of like implied that, you know, they obviously care about you. You know, maybe, and he was about to apologize in the episode beforehand about his behavior, you know, but I think that was before he got bitten. So I think there is a good guy there, and I think seeing all these people care about him and recognizing that he's probably not a bad guy, I think he just got a bad break, kind of like before the apocalypse. And it's kind of like, well, I think that was him letting go of all of the anger, not just being bitten and having to deal with those stages of grief, but I think also everything that's led up to that point before the apocalypse. It's like, there's just no point. There's acceptance. And it's like, as long as there's acceptance, now there's something that I can do, and I can be a positive force for this universe. I can make these, it's not only the beer that's my legacy, but it's these people. If I can make these people live on and do great things, that's also my legacy. So, but I think what I want to talk about now is that subversion. Because all this time we're focused kind of on the original characters, these new characters, but I don't think we nearly focused enough as much as we needed to on Morgan. We're assuming that we're looking at all these changes, all these people are making, Dory even stumbling a couple times. We got the major behavior changes of June, how she's kind of evolved from being this frightened person who is kind of always on the fence and always almost leaving, to being this person who is in the affirmative, who's trying new things, who's trying to be something different than what she was before. And what we haven't really been focusing on is Morgan himself, because you'd think that this entire show is about all these people trying to get better and try to find purpose and meaning and being vulnerable and telling the truth about what happened. But I think all of this is in the end, all of these people are going to, it's going to be about something completely different. It's going to be about Morgan in the end. I think this whole season has truly, in the final analysis, been about Morgan this entire time. Because to make these people better means that Morgan can finally reconcile everything that's happened to in his life. Because Morgan has had bigger problems than any of these people have ever had. Morgan has been, even in this episode, like, you could feel him losing himself. It's frustrating. Like, he's even annoyed with Jim at some point, Like, this is really hard for him. And he's even having a hard time accepting everybody else's help. Even when all of them come back in that hammy scene, he's like, you guys are putting yourself in danger. It's like, it's frustrating. And so this is going to come to a head finally, especially with this woman in the picture, trying to get him to turn back. This is the test.
Okay. All right.
Right. So, yeah. So, and I think that's really the entire purpose of of this season is to really be, it's the season about Morgan in the end. As much as it is about the other characters and how we fix them and focus on them at that point, in the end, it all is going to come back around to the beginning. It's all going to be about how saving these people saves Morgan.
All right. I can see that might be like the poetic direction that they're going into, the meaning of it all.
Yeah. I mean, because it definitely subverts expectations, because you think this show is going to be about, the Clarks and then, Strand and, all this stuff. And even like the new characters.
People are so disappointed.
What was that?
I think that's why a lot of people were disappointed, because they're like, well, how did this become the Morgan show? For people who were fans of the Clark family and that were fans of like the original Fear, they kind of were a little put off that it's like, well, here's Morgan, and now it's like he's a leader and it's the Morgan show. Like, how did this become his platform?
Yeah, but I think that's bullshit too, because if you really, there's so many reasons why that kind of thinking is bullshit. Like, I watched from the beginning as well, but we also watch The Walking Dead, and we have new favorites. Like, your favorite was Abraham Ford.
Yeah.
Right? And he wasn't part of the original group. He only came in like what, season 7? Yeah, 6, I mean.
I get it, but I do understand what they're saying though, in terms of like Madison. It seems like the Clark family was always the protagonist, particularly Madison.
Oh, that's true.
And then basically Madison was killed and Morgan is your protagonist now, and like the sort of like de facto leader. And I've seen some people say that they were kind of put off that the show didn't develop more Alicia as like following in her mother's footsteps and being the leader. They're like, why is Morgan, the leader? We're invested in Madison, we're invested in Alicia, we were invested in his name is escaping me right now, but they were invested
Strand and
not even Strand, the brother. What was this name?
Oh, Nick. Yeah.
Nick. It's like they're invested in like Madison, Nick, Alicia, primarily. Right. And so the loss of Madison was a huge blow to a lot of people. They really were kind of like shocked that the show would go down this road, because they're not necessarily sure. And again, it all comes back to the idea of what is the bigger plan, because I think a lot of people think that if you wanted to go this route, it's fine, but what is the purpose of killing off Madison, and how does it benefit the bigger picture of the bigger plan that is trying to happen? And for them to kind of see Alicia still sort of like not back burner, but she's not the protagonist. The protagonist is Morgan. Morgan is the center of the season.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, I think these two things are mutually exclusive, though. I think you can still pick. I would even say more than anybody else, June might be the. I'm not saying that, but like I think June seems more to be the more natural leader at this point, because she's trying things on more on the affirmative. I mean, I would want Alicia Clark to be the leader and stuff like that, but what I'm not saying is, I'm not saying that Morgan ends up being the leader, even though people do seem to look to him for decision making.
Right.
But I am saying that there's something to be said about the way you paint a season, and a season that could stand on its own, or the way a story arc goes, where it can be about somebody else. It can be about this one particular person and not take away from the others, and having that, having everybody have their own, like, I mean, the time that I spent on blogging the episode Close Your Eyes, episode 10 of the season, tells me a lot about the seriousness of, I know, a lot about the seriousness of this character and these characters, and how important they are and how vital they are to the story. Let's put a pin in that, because I know you need to get your kid.
Yeah.
All right, do you need to go, is the question.
I did hear a child crying.
Oh, okay. I'm taking that as a yes. Okay. So the bottom line is that, okay, give me a second to wrap this up.
Of course.
Okay. So, and that's basically where I was going. The bottom line is that I do think that there's going to be a subversion of expectations. I do think Morgan, it's going to kind of boomerang around to Morgan, like where people are kind of settling in, and then Morgan's going to have to do this thing on his own. And all these people are going to be like this, basically his backbone, the reminder of who he is, how far he's come, how much people are important to him. And then also the kind of transformative, how these people were what he needed all this time that he was not getting from Rick and his crew and these people in All Out War. It was just the wrong place, wrong time, whereas these people are the right place, the right time. And even Martha in this next episode coming up, that is also the perfect time for him to kind of encounter her, because it really is going to end up testing his mettle and where he's going to go. And I think there's going to be a push and pull in this season, in this next episode, that's going to define the way, first of all, that Fear the Walking Dead is going to go moving forward, because of where these characters are going to end up going, whatever happens with him, with Morgan and Martha, these two people of the same coin, but of different sides now. And so, yeah, I mean, even some of the things in the sneak peek, Morgan's walking down a road, contacting Martha. He reaches a point in the road where it kind of goes into a T, and he has to choose left or right to find mile marker 54, which is where Martha began, her origin of being evil. So, I mean, this is really going to come to a head. It's really kind of, this next episode is really kind of a lot about coming back to the beginning. Morgan's, the start of his journey, the start of Martha's journey. It may even bring us back to the start of everybody else's journey. We, obviously we don't know. And then we really are probably going to get to the heart of what happened to Althea, which is something that I think you and I are probably both, almost kind of nervous about, even though we do see her at some point. So, you still there? No. On that note, you've been listening to Squawking Dead, and we will see you in the season finale. Adios, amigos.